This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
All right, continuing and putting up some of these multi-part interviews from older shows. This one initially aired around June 2016. This was, I think, the first time I had Jeff Ritzmann on talking about his experiences, and it took 3 full shows to get through them all. So, this is the entire conversation in one show, and it's a weird one, so enjoy. And my guest tonight is Jeff Ritzmann. And how you doing tonight, Jeff?
Good, sir. How are you?
I am great. And you have some really interesting stuff going on. And first of all,
so they tell me.
First of all, tell people you do your own podcast.
I do.
And you've done some in the past. You want to give people a little podcast history?
Oh, wow. Second Eclipse was my first podcast. That was like back in the infancy days of podcasting. And I think that lasted probably 6 months. And from there, I met Jeremy Vaney at an X conference near D.C., one of Stephen Bassett's disclosure things, which we always went to for a laugh. And and Jeremy and I met there, and he was doing, he's going to kill me because I honestly don't remember what the name of his podcast was, but it was much more successful and listened to than my own. And he and I were on the phone one night, and he said, I'm sick of doing my podcast. And I said, we should do one together. And within a week, we had a name, Paratopia. And Paratopia then went on to run for, over 4 years and 170-some episodes that were all about 3 hours long or more, plus a live show on the weekends. And we discontinued that after we just felt it kind of ran its course. It was a premium podcast for the most part. And because every server that we got put on, they'd kick us off because we had too many people like accessing the server and crashing servers on Friday nights. Like, I'm not kidding. It was ridiculous. And so we stopped, and we kind of did our own thing for a while. Jeremy now hosts The Experience on Whitley Strieber's UnknownCountry.com. And I pretty much stick to doing our podcast. Jeremy and I started up Paratopia Oculus, about 10 episodes ago now. And it's probably the most unstructured, kind of just wild ride of a podcast that you could possibly want to listen to on these subjects. I mean, we just kind of we start off on a topic and it goes where it goes. Normally, we don't have guests. It's pretty much just he and I, just because we feel more work gets done that way. And we talk about, we don't talk about predominantly what's going on in the quote-unquote field. Like, that doesn't happen. So if you're looking for your favorite writers or your favorite, niche researchers, you won't find them on there. We kind of go more towards experimental thinking, thought projects of, how can we engage this phenomena in some kind of meaningful way that we can maybe garner some kind of information that may not be available through, the typical researchers. Like, we're looking for other stuff, the deeper aspects of it.
Right.
So that's what we're doing now, and that's at paratopiaoculus.com.
Cool. All right. And you do have a project we're going to be talking about in a little bit that's really fascinating. But I want you to get into some of your experiences. Like what got you interested in this stuff in the first place?
Wow. Well, it's so much. It's like, you ever listen to these podcast people or these your audience, I'm talking to them now. You guys ever listen to these podcasts or radio shows where some guy rambles on for like an hour and you go, what a mental case this guy is? Well, that's usually because there's so much that you just like, how do you frame this? So if I ramble, just put the brakes on me.
Sure.
I'll try to hit like the important bits that kind of woke me up a little bit. I would say from the age of 5 and possibly earlier, I had some pretty weird experiences at night. These experiences are probably the most potent memories of my life, and always have been there. And I can picture them in my mind like I've done a million times, and they have not changed. They are what they are. I mean, like every kid, Mom would tuck me in. I lived in suburban Baltimore County. I had great parents, great friends, great neighborhood. I mean, it was literally the perfect suburbia life. And I would go to bed at night. Mom would tuck me in, and she would go back out to watch TV with my dad for a couple of hours. Would leave a bathroom nightlight on for me. And to give people an idea, the lay of the room, most of the time, my bed was against a wall, and to my right was the bedroom door, which led out to a hallway. To the left was my mom and dad's room. To the right was the bathroom, like immediate right. And to my left, when I'm laying in bed, was a window that looked out onto a street lamp and the street and the mailbox and the rest of the yard. And so, like any kid, I didn't go to bed when I was told, and no kid does. And now that I got a 20-something-year-old that I've raised, I know this to be true. And I would sit up and play, or kind of try and read a book by the low light that was in the room. And the best way I can describe this is just to describe my perception of what happened. At one particular time, I was kind of playing with some little army guys on the edge of the bed, trying to be quiet so Mom didn't hear me. And I began to see a white dot dead in the center of my field of vision. And it looked to be, I don't want to say pulsating, but it had like a vibratory quality to it. It looked like it was slightly blurred. And it began to get larger in my field of vision. And no matter where I looked, it was always dead in the center of my field of vision. And I shut my eyes, it was still there. Open my eyes, it was still there. Look in the light, it was still there. Look towards darkness, it was even more there. And so I panicked a little bit, but you're more or less overwhelmed with this. As a kid, I remember thinking to myself, what is this? What's going on? Well, it can't be anything to worry about because no one's ever told me about this. So what, and before I knew it, it had literally filled my field of view. And it was a square, a spinning square that was spinning, perfect square, white, for you graphic design people out there, like a perfect vector square, no fuzzy edges, rotating as if it's on a pinwheel in the center and getting larger and larger until, I don't know how else to put it other than say I whited out. And I would, and again, I have no idea how much time passes, but I would more or less come out of this sometime later because I could hear my father snoring in the next room. So I knew they were then in bed. All the lights in the house were out except for that night light in the bedroom or in the bathroom. And this is where the whole story kind of gets exceedingly weird, as this is apt to do. When I would wake up, here's typical, I couldn't move. So there's your stereotype paralysis thing. But I could move my neck and head. And at times I could move my feet. And at times I could move my arms. There were variables in this. This happened, and this is where everybody goes, really? Well, really, this happened every night. Every night. I would wake up, not be... at some points, the window to my left and the doorway to my right were there. At times, it was not. I don't know what that means, whether if I was not in the room or whether I was in the room. Maybe, I don't know. But whatever sheets were on the bed that I was in were gone. What was covering me was a single black sheet, black pillowcase, black slipcover on the bed, hospital tight corners, hospital, like literally stretched across me so tight that you're practically getting your circulation cut off. And this blue light shone down on the bed, me, and the whole thing. And you could sometimes see outside of this blue light, but most of the time it was so intense. I remember many occasions looking and seeing dust particles falling in the air. And at times, and there were variables in this, I would, and of course I would be absolutely horrified. I mean, terror is not a good enough word. I think there's a really good word to describe it. Just sheer panic. And you can't get enough air in your lungs to scream. I did try. I could get out some sound, but no one ever seemed to respond to it. For lack of a better way to put it, either I would pass out from just sheer horror because I'd wake up the next morning and everything would be fine.
Right.
But at times I would wake up in that blue light with the black sheets and the whole scenario of the white square and everything like that all went like textbook every night. But sometimes there were variables, like at times I would see small, big-headed people around the edge of the bed. You couldn't make out features. All you could see would be like the tops of the head. At least that's what I perceived them as, heads. And they would whisper to each other. Like you couldn't understand what they were saying. It was kind of like this strange type of almost chanting sound to it. But at times it was, that kind of thing, back and forth. And I would lay there and listen to them and try and make out facial features, and you just couldn't. And at one time, I was told by my mom, and I told her the whole story one night. I said, "This is what happens. Does this happen to you? Is this normal? Like, what are those people that come in the night? Like, who are these people? Because I can't move." And and she said, "Well, you're dreaming. That's what this is. It's a dream." And so I said, "No, Mom, this is not a dream." And I remember saying to myself, tonight when this happens, I'm going to sit up and I'm going to prove to her that this is not a dream. I'm going to prove it to myself. And that night I did indeed sit up in the blue light with the black sheets, and I pulled these sheets literally up to my face. And I said, "These sheets are black. I am not dreaming. I am awake. What is going on here?" And again, I heard some whispering here and there. There was no bedroom door. There was no bedroom window. And to my left, I saw a pair of hands start coming into the light towards me. They were extraordinarily long fingers with black fingernails, rather long black fingernails. Not in a threatening way. They weren't, oogity boogity coming at me. It was just kind of like reaching in to touch my leg or to touch at me or to, you almost got a sense that, is this somebody trying to comfort me in some way? Right. And to that, I have no memory after that. I don't remember how it ends. I don't remember how any of these experiences end for those times. And there were so many other variables, like, playing with someone in the doorway of my bedroom very late at night. It was cold. I remember it was chilly in the house. And this is often what happens at, 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm playing with someone by my door, and they don't look like me, but I can't really look at them. Like I talk to them, but I don't really look at them. And then they say something like, "You want to take a piggyback ride?" And I said, "Sure." And I got on their shoulders, not looking at them. I just kind of was put on their shoulders, and we glided down the hallway. And I thought, well, this is weird. Nobody's walking. We're actually gliding. It was like being pulled on a pulley. And we went out towards the kitchen, and the dog growled, and we politely turned like literally just made a loop. Like, nope, that's not going to work. Let's go out the front door. The front door opened without anybody opening it, and we went outside. To that, I don't remember anything else. And these things happen intermittently. There was only one time for that, but there were these strange, weird, non-UFO, quote-unquote, connected events that all my life, I never knew what to do with them. But I knew that they were incredibly powerful experiences that I'd had, and I didn't know what to do with it. And they happen every day, or every night, rather. I say every night. There may have been a couple nights where it didn't happen, but by and large, every night from the ages of 5 to 9.
Did they just stop at that point?
On my 9th birthday, we had a birthday party, and as usual, all the guests went home, and and as parents do, they put me to bed, and I had some toys that I had gotten for my birthday. I was playing with them, and I wasn't going to sleep. Not on a bed. I was full of cake and pixie sticks. I'm not going to sleep, right? So it's 9:30, and I'm like, okay, it's time for bed, but whatever. And so, I'm playing, and Mom and Dad, I can hear them talking about, did you see what so-and-so's kid did to the house and this, that, and the other? And I distinctly remember them going into the bedroom, because I remember I got to play like I'm asleep. So I drop down and I play like I'm asleep. And they're in their room, and I hear them talking and giggling, and meanwhile I'm playing, and I'm giddy that they don't know I'm awake and that I'm listening to them talk, and and so I'm laying there, or rather I was sitting up at that time, and there's this enormous flash from outside the window, and I don't know, I guess the best description that I've heard somebody talk about, most notably Colin Andrews had mentioned this at one time to me, that there was a point where it feels like all the air out of the room is sucked out. And that's a really good description. That's kind of what it felt like, because there was the sound of, an air conditioner, and there was the sound of my dog's nails on the linoleum in the kitchen, and there was the sound of Mom and Dad talking real low and hush whispers, and all of a sudden when that flash went off, it all just stopped. And it was this weird kind of silence that was just pin drop quiet.
Well, it's the Oz factor.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know what I equated that to, but I was like, okay, that's weird. I don't hear them. And I called out. I said, Mom, Dad. Nobody answered. Very strange. And then I heard somebody walking down the hallway. And for those kids who, like me, who grew up in the 70s and 80s, you remember shag carpet, right? That stuff makes a racket when you walk on it. And I could hear this shuffling in the hallway. And into my room walks this man. Probably, 4.5 feet tall or so. Skin like silly putty. Not porous skin, not textured skin, but really smooth looking. Slightly dirty looking. Quite large eyes. I don't know how correct the communion alien is, but it's close to that. Like, there's something not quite right about that. The shape of the head isn't quite right, and the eyes certainly aren't perfect, but that's as close as I think we're going to be able to get in this kind of weird experience thing to try and equate a look to. It was kind of that look. Only there was this variable. It had a hat on that that looked like spun copper. It was kind of shaped, and I always said, when I was little, I said it's shaped like a rice paddy hat, because I'd always see these people on MASH in the rice paddies with these hats on. Well, it looked like that, except it was a little more rounded than that. And it was copper colored, bronzes colored, and it looked like a wok lid. And he came over to me, and I thought, I wasn't scared. I don't know why I wasn't scared. I should have been, but I wasn't. I said, what a neat thing this is. This must be some surprise that Mom and Dad have set up. What's this about? This guy's funny looking. Okay. And I leaned over towards him off the bed, like I'm leaning, and he's standing beside the bed looking at me. And I leaned over to him, and I said, who are you? And he put his hand up, like, don't talk. And then he rubbed his hands together real flat. And I noticed when he put his hands together, abnormally long fingers with black fingernails. And I'm like, okay. And he rubbed his fingers together, and he turned his palms toward me, both hands, like nothing here, nothing here. Showed me the back of his hands, front of his hands. He pulled his hands apart as if he was going to clap. And I thought, well, this is where it's all exposed. This is where I find out what this is all about. You know, this is the surprise. And he claps his hands. And when he claps his hands, it's, again, here's the bizarre part, if this all wasn't bizarre enough. It's like a gong going off. It's like the biggest gong, like a gong the size of the neighborhood. Gets cracked right next to your ear, you know, with a big mallet. And it just is, it blew right through me. All of a sudden, this enormous wave of fear swept over me. I fell backwards, and I remember nothing else. And I had these memories like my whole life, and never knew what is that? Like, what was that? And I would tell people intermittently in my life about that. Like, I would say to the guidance counselor at school, well, you know those people that come in your room with the blue light at night? Like, do you? And she would go, I'm sorry, what? Okay, no, nothing. Never mind. Like, occasionally it would get me the weird looks, but a lot of people that I would talk to would go, well, that's pretty fascinating. Like, what do you think that was? I said, I have no idea what it was. And then, you know, throughout my young days of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, probably stopped around 15, 16, somewhere in there. But, you know, I had UFO sightings, daylight, predominantly daylight. One particular one I remember was very odd in that it was a red ball, shiny, seemed to be structured, you know, with a seam in the middle. It was seriously spinning. And I guess the best way to put it is that it would flash, like there was a big flash where it was. Very spiky flash, like a cartoon type, like Wile E. Coyote getting hit with a mallet, right? That kind of spiky flash, and it would just be gone. It would just disappear. And then it would flash again, and it would be there again. And it would do this over and over for 5 minutes. And finally, it winked out, and it didn't come back. And so I ran into my mom, and I said, Mom, you're never going to believe what I just saw. And I explained it to her, and she looked at me like I've never seen her look since. Blank. She looked very blank at me. And she said, maybe it was a weather balloon. And I just went outside, and I said, I remember standing on the breezeway and saying, what's a weather balloon? And I wouldn't get the joke, of course, until years later. And and so, you know, when I started hearing about people having very bizarre experiences with hauntings and with UFOs, and I said, that was what this is. And then when I saw the cover of Communion and saw some artwork from other places that really resembled what I remember seeing in my room that night, I said, this is what this is. This is a UFO thing, and this stuff is a definitive ghost thing, because I also had those kind of experiences with this stuff too. And sometimes the two would intermingle, and some, you know, kind of bizarre duet. But I think the most bizarre things are what are the most important bits of this. And as you and I were talking before the program, Like, I really don't subscribe to the, like, I don't know what this is. Like, I don't know. I think a lot of what people have been told about paranormal phenomenon is not the whole story. And so there is a level of bizarreness and a level of self-negation to this experience that renders it fodder for skeptics and for people to make fun of. So I understand why it's made fun of and why it's marginalized and all that. Makes it no less irritating, but I get it. I totally get it. But I had, I had plenty of other things throughout my life that kind of led up to a big experience that kind of like said, "Yep, that's what it is," and that involved my wife, and.
Well, before we get to that, let me ask you this: when you saw the white square, was it like just a color or of white, or was it actually look like light?
No, it literally looked like when I do presentations, which are damn rare. I have a flash video that I show, and it's literally a vector white square that is rotating on a pin axis in the center. There was no pin axis in the center of this thing. It was just a white square rotating as if on a pinwheel. It wasn't a light per se. It was just, this visual perception of this growing geometric shape. And I don't know what to make of that. The one thing that I found out from psychologists and psychoanalysts and even neurologists over the years is that the mind works in geometry. Visionary things work in geometry. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, if this is, as I know it to be now, is some, I guess we can call it other intelligence or an other of some kind. There's somebody else in the apartment building is what I'm getting at here, folks. I don't know what it is, but there's definitely somebody else in the building. Then that would be an effective way of trying, I guess, to communicate is in baseline geometry. That would be kind of a communication of sorts. Now, what it said, I have no idea.
Maybe you were occasionally waking up from the Matrix into the real world.
I mean, I'll tell you what, honest to God, what I thought at the moment that some of these things were happening. When I would see that white square, I would get, I don't know where these thoughts came from a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid, but I would say things to myself like, it's okay, they're just coming to finish me. I'm not done yet. Whatever that means. I will say that, I've been a working commercial designer and artist for all my professional career. Like, literally, that's all I wanted to do my entire life. And that creative, offshoot started in those times, during those periods where I was having these experiences. This is where, like, a wellspring of creative stuff welled up from me. And from there, it was, not just like, oh, he can draw really well. It was like, no, we need to get this kid into a G&T program, and he needs to go away for summers to like art colonies and stuff like that. And, and it was really weird. I mean, it was weird taking art classes next to people who are like in their teens and 20s and like,
And also for anyone who doesn't know, G&T is gifted and talented.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of
do
stuff.
they even still have those anymore?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know. My last one that I went to was when I was in 11th grade, between 11th and 12th grade. They sent me to Goucher College to do that. It was like a 2-week really intensive period of painting and drawing and visualization to, like not having to look at an object to draw it, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I really enjoyed that thing. And I've always enjoyed what I do. But I always wonder, like, where'd that come from? Like, is that what I meant when I said that? Like, I don't know. I didn't even know that was necessarily my thought. That's the creepy part about it. Like, you'll hear people talk in this field about, well, I heard a voice in my head from this alien being that spoke to me, and he spoke to me through telepathy. And, people say that, and that's fine if you want to believe that. But your audience members need to close their eyes for a second and imagine something in front of them that isn't human. And now imagine hearing a voice in your head that isn't you. That's scary, man. That's nothing trite and common. There's nothing common about that. And I've had that, and it's excruciatingly bizarre. It's fearful beyond comprehension. I mean, did I think I was going crazy? Absolutely. At one point in my life, absolutely. Absolutely.
When you were having this every night, did it ever null the fear for you after a while?
No, it really didn't.
What do you think the fear was mainly caused by? Was it just an animalistic type of fear, or was it something you were actually afraid of?
I think it was the idea that I didn't know what was going on, and I think, like most human beings, I don't like loss of control, and I think being paralyzed or not being able to move like I normally would move. And it wasn't always complete paralysis. Sometimes it was just I can't really leave this bed because I don't know what's outside of that light. Is my bed floating? I don't know.
Right.
I can't see the floor. So I don't know what's going on outside. And I felt like at least I can see in here. But that's something people ask me a lot because I've had a lot more hair-raising stuff than that. And that by comparison to later stuff in life was tame.
But not for a kid.
No, not for a kid. What is still kind of confounding to me is how, is how later on in life, and I probably never said this on any other time I've ever, it literally just occurred to me is the innocence factor and all of that when you're a kid. You are such an open little eggshell, it's you're like a sponge, you soak up everything.
Yeah.
And when you get older, you've always got these preconceived ideologies that then color everything that happens and every event that you have in your life. And I think at that point, when you're that little, you're dealing with things like, dealing with other kids and the start of bullies and all that kind of stuff. You've got all that to deal with. And then you've got these things at night that won't let you sleep. And then you've got stuff like, well, Jeff doesn't stay awake in class, That could be because,
So it was actually affecting your sleep.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to the point where Mom took me to the doctor a couple times because, she said he looks so tired all the time. He's got these circles under his eyes. He shouldn't have these circles under his eyes. He's young, And he's like, are you sleeping well, kiddo? And I'm like, not really, And I didn't really I never have told a doctor per se about the things I'd experienced until much later on. But as a kid, I didn't bring that up because I saw the faces of people that I did talk about it to. And I was like, nah, I got enough to deal with in some years later with braces and girls and all that stuff. You got all that to deal with. Who wants to deal with this? So
now, did you see any UFOs while this stuff was happening? Initially?
No.
So that only started after the last event?
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean,
it's almost like it transitioned into something else.
Well, I can't say that the UFO I described, the daylight one, I can't really say that was after. That was pretty much right smack in the middle, probably 6 or 7 years old. But that was kind of a one-off. It wasn't until later on, after 9 years old, that I began to get these glimpses of things in the sky, and some of them were lengthy. And I should say that I grew up really close to Loch Raven Dam. And if anybody out there in Google land wants to Google Loch Raven Dam UFO, you'll see that's been there's been some interesting cases in there. And I would say that the red ball that I described earlier, that was towards that direction that I was looking. So again, I can't make the solid confirmation. I have no photograph. I have only my memory of that. But the interesting bit about that sighting in particular was that somebody was with me, and I can't remember who they were. I remember saying, don't you see this? Don't you see what this? They're like, yeah, come on, let's just go play. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not playing right now. Like, yeah, I'm looking at this. You don't see
like it wasn't bothering.
Like it didn't bother them at all. Like it had no, like they didn't care. Like, yeah, I see it. So what? Let's play. And that's disturbing.
Well, yes and no, because you figure a kid may just figure it's something they just didn't know about.
Could possibly be, And I really only had one kid in the neighborhood that I played with, and he passed away from esophageal cancer a few years ago, and I remember asking him before he got sick, and when we were talking one night, I said, "Do you remember that? Do you have any memory of that at all?" He says, "Dude, it must have been somebody else, wasn't me." He said, "We weren't even hanging out then. I didn't know you at that age. I knew you like around 9 or 10 years old." I said, "Dude, I can't remember who that was," and that bothers me to this day. That I can picture somebody standing beside the tree in the front lawn, and I cannot picture their face. Just don't know who that was. But the fact that they wanted me to go with them and ignore this thing, that's bothersome to me now, knowing, how a phenomena kind of, just kind of how, folklore has worked over the years on this subject and the tangents that are reached in that kind of place. So, it's bothersome. But no, the fear of this stuff is never, I'm still afraid of it. I still have abnormal fear about it.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's inherently fearful. And that's something that I've worked on. I've tried to work on over the years. And I would say that as a man who's going to be 50 years old next year, I would say I'm more curious these days, but I still have a healthy respect for its distance. It's the best way I can know to put it. Like, I don't want it in my house, but it's in my house. It's been in every place that I've lived, and so I don't expect it's going to wane anytime soon unless I completely disengage from the entire field and the whole subject and all of that. I mean, that can happen, but it's a healthy respect for it these days. But I'm more curious about the mechanism of it.
Yeah.
Why is not a productive question to ask, but why?
I've with my experiences, it almost seemed to me like they were trying to teach me to overcome fear.
And that is one way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, because after a while, I learned how to disconnect. Like, yeah, okay, this is really scary. I'm just going to put that off to the side and just deal with it on a very logical level.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a point for me that I almost realized that this, I guess, in no small part came from just interacting with people who were other experiencers who I trusted and who had things happen to them that were somewhat similar to me. Not so much in like the visuals or the scenarios, but more along the lines of just the ultra weird, the disconnect from sensible discussion, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, it really is hard to talk about these things because there are words that just don't quite fit, but nonetheless are the only thing you've got. And I saw this same inner fight with other experiencers, and when we would talk about this stuff, we would go into these places where you don't hear these things talked about on radio or podcast or even written in books for that matter. And what I kind of got was it's that I think the way that you approach this or the way that you initially react to it is then its blueprint for further manifestations of what comes at you. So in other words, if I was inherently fearful of what I saw, even though these experiences weren't, always oogity boogity scary, then it's almost like, and I'm not saying this is how it works, but it's almost like this thing doesn't know how to relate to us. And so when we go, we scream and we go, oh my God, what is this? And your heart's pounding and you're you're palpitating and you're sweating and freaking out, it goes, oh, that's okay, boogity boogity. Like, it doesn't get it. Like, it goes, okay, I can be scary if that's what you want. Okay, that's clearly what you want because that's how you're reacting to me. Maybe it's that. I'm like, that's like the scenario I play around with in my head. I know that's not how this works. I get that that's not what this is really saying, but it's almost like it's childlike in that kind of way. If you look at, if you frame the discussion in that kind of context, you could say, well, maybe it doesn't know how to react to you, and so it's giving you, it's a mirror. It's reflecting at you what you're putting out.
Yes.
And so that does have some validity to me, but it's so much more complex than that idea.
Well, the way I've been looking at it is, I mean, first of all, I don't think we understand what reality is.
Well,
I don't think we understand it in the slightest bit, and I think we need a completely new map of it to really even include this stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think when these things interject into our reality, I don't think our brain has anything to put on it.
Correct.
It's almost like, okay, there's this weird energy signature that I'm getting and I don't know what to do with it. Let's put a monster there because it's weird and I don't know what it is and we don't know what monsters are, so monster.
Right, exactly.
And then that thing has to interact with us from that state of monster because that's what we gave it.
That's what you skin it with.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, to me, there is this kind of I don't know. There's definitely a cultural filter when you look at this across like Americans. It's one thing for the most part, or a couple of different variations. But when you get into like South America or even overseas, you get these different manifestations of this kind of thing. Which I find to be really interesting. So there's a cultural aspect to this. There's also a psychological aspect to this. Like, that's the big thing in UFO land. And this is the really disappointing thing to me about mainstream ufology is like, it's like, like a psychologist is the Antichrist in that field, like there's always this really hardcore effort to refute the psychological. And like that to me is an extremely short-sighted view to take. Like, there is a psychological component to this, no question about it. Is it all psychological? Well, all of reality is psychological. If you want it, you all live within the confines of the 3-pound brain in your skull. So that's your 3-pound reality. So there's that. But let's go past that and say, okay. It's well-known, established medical fact that the brain is a dampening mechanism. Okay, it confines us to, a certain visual spectrum, taste, touch, smell, hearing, these things. I think it's well established now in science that this reality that we recognize with our visual cortex and all of our other senses is not even close to everything that there is.
Oh, sure.
And so it feels like to me, like for a brief instant in a paranormal event, that dampening mechanism is like chains off. You get it all for about, a minute or two, or maybe less. Some people longer, some people it drives to the brink of insanity. I've seen this. Yes, this does drive people as batty as you accuse people of being. Mm-hmm. So yes. But if the brain is a dampening mechanism, what is the brain doing in an experience like this? We don't know because there's never been any funding to try and test this kind of thing. And this kind of gets into the marginal viewpoint that the world takes on paranormal studies in general. Parapsychology in general really is a marginal field. So, but yeah, I mean, for me, this has been at times textbook as far as the UFO portions of it go, but has some very weird components that involve people around me as well. Like, it's not just relegated to me. Right. At a certain point, like I said, my wife and I had a pinnacle experience that kind of opened the floodgates, and our lives became the proverbial three-ring circus for a few years, and that was really hard.
Before we get into that,
sure.
Though, let's talk about the project you have ongoing right now. You did another thing called Project Core.
Yeah.
And what was the goal of Project Core?
Now, the Project Core was with Jeremy Vaney and I kind of talked three research scientists into joining us. So we had a certain academic approach to this thing, into data gathering from people who had paranormal experiences. We absolutely didn't put any chains on or any restrictions on what they felt, their experience felt. And it wasn't just UFO abductions, quote unquote abductions. I hate that word, but that experience, or ghosts, or jinn, or take your pick. It could be anything in the paranormal field or realm. And we got them to fill out a multiple choice questionnaire, very short, maybe 20 questions, and then a large blank field on the webpage where they could basically say, here it is, guys. Tell us what your experience was. If it's more than one, pick your most, extreme one. Pick the one that had the most influence on you and tell us what happened. They had a lot of room to write. In fact, I don't think there was any limit on characters in that. And so other questions were, what's your blood type? Do you know what it is? Here, tell us what your blood type is. Have you ever taken an IQ test? Yes or no? If you did, how did you score? And IQ tests are, again, they're very
arbitrary.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to put it. You can't really say what's a good and what's a bad IQ test. There's some that you can definitely say are bad, but what constitutes a good one? We don't know. Things like, what is your national heritage? What nationality are you, and where does your ancestral heritage come from? Things like, have you ever messed with psychedelic drugs? Have you ever had a relationship with an occult practice, Wicca, to a Ouija board? Any of that?
I'm pretty sure I filled this out. How many years ago was this that you did this?
Several now at this point. I'm pretty sure you probably did at some point or another. Because a lot of people did. I mean, we got over around 250 responses. We rejected some of them because one of the context problems, or the contextual problems with this particular thing was, if your thing was UFO related, we did not accept testimony that was retrieved under hypnotic regression, because everybody at the table really said, and I've long fought against that practice for decades now, and it's a useless tool for retrieving nothing. I mean, it's useless. Yeah. So we don't want that. And a couple of people gave us that anyway, and we just rejected those. We got it done, and then it was reading all of these accounts, over 200. And it was like, some of this stuff was truly off the charts bizarre. And you read this stuff and you go, it's too dumb to make up. Like in your wildest dreams. No. And so, there's this ring of familiarity to what you've experienced. And so, and some things you would read and go, I can't conceive of this, but if this is what this person reports, I'm reading it. And so we were very open about that. But then it was to amalgamate all of the data that we collected. And being an anonymous survey, we got interesting results, but it was a preliminary first step. And what we saw was essentially the people that report paranormal phenomena who responded to this survey, yes, were a lot of Irish, Celtic, German descent, as far as ancestral heritage. Also a lot of Native American ancestral heritage responded. A lot of people with above average IQ, at least. Some blood type similarities were reported in there. I'm getting ready to put this study back up, the whole totality of it, the commentaries from 3 of the people who participated in it, me, Jeremy, and one of the research scientists, Dr. Ellen Tarr. We all wrote kind of a piece on it, like what we got from it, even though it was a preliminary first step. Like, here's where we should go with this. And as I mentioned to you, it's being moved because nobody really cared. Because, and this is something that I negated to mention in our prior discussion, it was not widely read. I think the more serious components of ufology and the paranormal did read it. Our George Hansen, a good friend of mine, who is a groundbreaker in this field to me.
Absolutely.
He read it. He was very impressed, and I think he was quite skeptical about us being able to do anything of substance to start with, and he was very pleasantly surprised. He thought it was great. A great first step. And again, being a first step, you don't reach conclusions at a first step. So taking an academic approach to this thing, having a real statistician on board to actually do the work, and to have, understudies for this from these professors that were working with us on we had really nice stuff, really organized well, thoughtfully presented, and the paranormal world said, yeah, we don't care. Because you don't say ghost and you don't say flying saucers and aliens and extraterrestrials or whatever. So there was that.
Do you realize that when you said the German English heritage, you said high IQ, these are some of the same things that David Paulides is finding among missing people?
Yes. And I don't know what to say about that right now.
Yeah, it's just, but it is. It's
yes.
there. That's the same pattern he's finding, or the same patterns you're finding in these experiencers.
Yes. I mean, nobody wants to walk through the purple door and never be seen again. But does it happen? I don't know. I'm not at that juncture yet. If I don't want it to be me. I'll put it to you that way. But yes, there are these similar things that are very interesting, but need further study to substantiate these into something meaningful. Sure. And we need a much broader survey net. When we said online survey, we expected quite a turnout. And the facts of the matter are, you can't get a significant turnout in this field from people when you're asking for a lot of people to put forth. I tried to make it so that it was the most minimal effort to fill this out. Very simple. Another guy out there it had a survey, and it was like some ridiculous number of questions, and it required probably more than an hour to fill out. That's retarded. Wow. That's just ridiculous. You're not going to get massive returns on something like that. You've got to keep it simple. You've got to keep it concise. But the next step is decidedly more invasive, to where we have to try to establish an IQ test. We have to try and establish blood testing for all participants, and then try to substantiate these things in a meaningful way so that it's statistically viable. That's what you have to do. And I know that's all really dry and boring stuff and nobody cares. But, somewhere along the line, something pops out at you about this stuff. And that goes to the project now, which is Project Oculus. So what I took away from this was pretty much what George Hansen laid in my lap or showed to me. For years I had seen, long before I met George, I had seen these patterns in people, that they were often artistically inclined, they were creative types, they were really articulate and smart, but they lived these like non-routine lifestyles, and didn't fall into the mold of routine like a lot of people do. And I always wondered what that was. Like, it's really weird, because they're a lot like Bill's, a lot like John, and Katie's a lot like Jane. And why are these people so similar? And and George basically said these are people living an anti-structural lifestyle. They're in liminal states, which means between things, states of change, edge of chaos, that sort of thing. Um, and this goes into the marginal personalities, which are often found in this field, marginal people, people who are easily dismissed. So people that are into routine or into structure would look upon the anti-structural people as losers, cranks, kooks, nutbags, this type. So this is why this thing is marginalized. This is why this is. And so I go, okay, so if the paranormal does manifest more along the lines of out of routine situations, people, places, events, great. So I've had this in my life, most of my life, because I live that way. I do art. I'm very, if I get an inspiration to do something at 2 o'clock in the morning, I do it. And damn going to sleep the next day. I mean, that's just it. And so what happens when you immerse yourself in that kind of life? What happens if you take hold of that and live that? And try not to think about, I'm living this anti-structure, just be it. And so that's the Project Oculus, which is up right now at gofundme.com/Project Oculus. If you go there and you search for paranormal, I should come up pretty high on the list. And the idea here is that we're going to try to engage phenomena that I've seen and photographed around my house. And there's a couple of examples in the video on that page of light phenomena in the hallway that is really weird and bright and super colorful for a cell phone photograph, but doesn't reflect light. In other words, there's no indirect lighting. It's strictly the light is coagulated around the object, whatever that object of intense light is. I sent those photographs when I took them to Ted Phillips of the Landing Trace case group, and he's been studying this Marley Woods case for years now. And he said, in fact, this is what they see in Marley Woods. This is that same bright, rich-colored, oversaturated color with light, bright light, that doesn't seem to reflect on the ground, the trees, the environment. It's non-reflective light, which doesn't make a lot of sense in our neat little reality here. And so my thought is, well, if we integrate live cams into the environment of my home and we completely ensconce them, in other words, they become part of the house. It's not like, well, cameras are watching. No, we just put cameras up and we live with them. And we live this, I live an anti-structural lifestyle anyway. So depending on what I do, if I have an intense art project that I'm working on, if I'm working on some deadline for work, I'm staying up late, I'm eating odd hours, I'm not eating right, I'm, gaining and losing weight. But there's also this added element of we're renovating our house. And the example I use in the video on the GoFundMe page is we've all heard the story of, the couple who buys their fixer-upper dream home. And the minute they start renovating, the ghosts in the house don't like them renovating, and so they haunt them. And I just ask people to look at it a different way, in that they are not disrupting the ghosts in the house. They are in a state of change. They have bought this house, so they're out of routine. They're not used to the new house. They're also renovating. They're changing the house from what it was to what it will be. That's a state of between, liminal state, right? Textbook. Is it any wonder why they start having paranormal experiences of ghosts in the house when this happens? This fits perfectly within the textbook of liminal states, anti-structural behavior. It's not just the house, it's the people. The people are living like out of cardboard boxes a lot of times when they first move in or when they're renovating. They're not sleeping the same. They may not be going to work regular hours. And there may be stress and friction in the house. All of this stuff combined. This is what, here's my favorite catchphrase, this is what surrounds paranormal events. This is what people don't look at. All we want to look at is, what was the ghost wearing? Or what kind of alien abducted you? We need to start thinking about What was your life like at the time? What surrounded this event? What was life like for you at this point? And people hear that and immediately go, well, he's just trying to reduce it to the psychological. Not at all. This is about life. This is about how does this ensconce itself in our life to be there in that moment. What was it surrounded by? And what you find time after time after time. Anti-structural behavior, marginal places, people, things. It's all over it. It's all over it. And so my thought is, if I can make it all over me, it's going to be all over this house. And so a camera outside, which we've seen some strange things in our lawn. Inside, in the hallway, near the bathroom, pretty hot area for weird stuff in this house. Maybe some nights we throw the camera in the living room. I want to change it up. I don't want it to be a routine place where the camera is, because routine is not conducive to this.
Right.
Change is. And so what I'm trying to get funding for is to buy drop cams, which are moderately expensive, but not horrible, but they're super dependable. They have great night vision. They have great audio. They can be recorded online. Nest, the parent company, for a fee every month, will record you, will DVR all of your feeds in 1080p, right? So it seems like the best of all worlds. Now, the better part that we can do to add to this, and the reason that funding is so important, is that, 3 cameras is around $600-800 or a little more. By the time you figure in the Nest fee, I don't know what that's going to be to record these things. But anyway you cut it, it's a lot of money. I also want to add some things in, like, how about a Trifield meter running, a natural Trifield meter. So we have natural EMF being monitored in the room. If we get something on camera in the room and it's recorded and it's detected by the camera, which is the great part about these cameras, is they have movement detection. So you can put a hot area over the whole screen. If something moves in that room, that camera's going to message you. It's going to record that, monitor it, and it's going to say, on your timeline, here's a little yellow bit where I saw something happen. Very easy to twaddle through these things and monitor it. So it's the best of all worlds, but if we get something on camera, wouldn't it be great to have the Trifield meter respond in kind to the image on the screen? Yeah. It's not enough just to have the visuals. Take it from a visual analyst for the past 30 years. It's not enough. You need something else. You need correlation of a couple of different things. So equipment, I've got one thing that's been kind of okey-doed by the parapsychological community that I've interacted with. They seem to like this piece of equipment. We're going to utilize that. But there's still other things we want to get. So, for $20, a $20 donation, which I don't think is terrible, I give you a password or an access to, where we're going to have the live feeds going on a web page. And you'll be able to look at those and monitor them yourself. Nice. And so that's kind of like, that's my only perk. I don't have a lot to offer, folks. It's just watch my house. But, Hess Dahlen, the Hess Dahlen project has been pretty successful with this kind of thing, catching, anomalous lights and activity around Hess Dahlen. And, I'm doing kind of the same thing, but I'm trying to directly engage this by living an anti-structural life, by changing my house. Renovations are going on. Things are in flux. It's the perfect time. So, and the good news is that there's no end to this. It's like, if they don't work in one spot, we move them. We try something else. It's an ongoing experiment, which I don't think really has been done before. So I could use everybody's help with it, because I unfortunately can't do it alone.
And the question beyond all this is, why do liminal areas bring this stuff in? Why does anti-structural behavior draw this stuff in?
I can only parrot George Hansen and say that why is not a productive question to ask. I don't know. There's so much I don't know. I mean...
I think going into my interview with George Hansen, I thought that it was that, we're changing our behaviors, so we're noticing things we may not notice otherwise. But he corrected me and said that's not necessarily the case.
No, I mean, it may be a part of it.
Right.
But I think we got to be really careful not to exclude the psychological from it. In other words, some of these behaviors are psychologically rooted. I mean, my psychology is that, and I'm not kidding, this is how my work, my job, my home artwork that I do, if I'm asleep on the couch and I wake up and I go to the kitchen to pour a glass of milk and I go, oh man, that's an awesome idea. I'm out in the shop like 10 minutes later, like drawing it up and going, all right, I got to get to bed, but I'm on to this in the morning. And sometimes you wake up in the morning and you go, this is crap. Or sometimes you go, I got to build this like right now. And that's just how it works for me. Like that's my psychology is I can't not do it in the moment because if I don't, I lose it.
Yes.
Yeah. A project started will end up differently if you stop and take a break in the middle of it. You can't do that. I can't do that. And so, henceforth, why creative people? I think creative people in routine. I mean, don't people understand that this is why artists dye their hair purple and wear funny clothes sometimes in their youth, and some of them engage in psychedelic drugs and all that. Like, do people not understand that? That's what this is. It's the creative process. That is, it's the internal externalizing, and we talked about Jeff Kripal before the program. This is what Jeff, really talks about a lot is the paranormal some amalgamation of an external and an internal that is becoming external by force of us. In other words, are we reaching out a hand and it's grabbing the hand? And how much does the creative process play into these things? These are all things we have no idea. We have no idea what this means. Why does Discord bring this stuff in? The easy answer is, well, it's demonic. Nah, sorry, I'm not buying that. But can you understand why people would say that's evil? You can understand this. At some point when you understand the marginal aspects of this, and you understand how the human behavior responds to the unknown, and then how it reacts within the context of anti-structure and liminal states and marginal people and places, then you understand hoaxes. Like hoaxes used to burn me up, right? Because they'd waste my time. Give me a photograph, do an exam on it, it's a hoax. I'm just aggravated, it's a waste of my time. Well, now I go, such things are completely to be expected. I completely expect hoaxes. I completely expect people to lie. I had a guy just last week show me an orb photograph that was clearly a dust particle. I mean, so clearly that I could compare it to any dust particle anyone would show me. And he says, well, I saw that with my naked eye. It was as big as a bowling ball. I was like, no, see, just because you say that I'm not inclined to believe that because of what you're showing me. If you would show me video of you chasing this thing through the tree, then I go, okay, we got something going on here. No, people embellish a lot. And I don't know how people do that. Because for me, I'm not going to sit here and lie to everybody and say, have I ever thought of trying to make the story more interesting? And I go, well, why? Why? It's already ridiculously unbelievable. It's already interesting enough, But how do I become heard for this? Because I feel like this is important. But how do I? Well, the temptation is to say, well, I make up some story. Do you know what this phenomena I believe would do to me if I did that? I fear this thing. No, I'm not kidding. I mean, it's funny on some level, but I fear this, and I fear what would happen if I did lie about it or even embellish it. Like,
I would think, if anything, you'd be tempted to tone it down, make it
and
better with what people expect.
I think there was the temptation to do that in the beginning. but then I kind of recognized, like, no, this bizarre thing, this needs to be talked about because nobody's talking about this. And yet in private, everybody opens up about it. Like every experiencer I've ever met, I know it's beyond weird. And and the self-negation aspect of it, I think that's a major clue with all of this. Like, I don't think it's just marginality. I think there is an active component of this thing that says, like Jacques Vallée said, to report this with 100% honesty is to be thought a fool. You can't, you can't talk about this. It's I don't know how familiar with Terence McKenna's stuff that you are.
Somewhat.
I mean, people widely consider him like the godfather of the mushroom, the psychedelic mushroom, and all of that. And yeah, he is all those things, and he's a botanist, and he was incredibly smart, incredibly well read, but he was also very intrigued by the UFO subject, and he drew parallels between psychedelic experiences and the UFO experiences, and there are some. It is in some ways a psychedelic kind of thematic going on. The very bizarre aspect to it is there, and as somebody who never took drugs in my life, he was partially one of the big reasons I said, yes, I'm going to eat a magic mushroom. I'm going to see what that's like, because I want to know, is that like what I experienced as a kid? Is that what this is? And the answer was no. The answer was, it's like, I know a lot of people get real insight from it. I got insight like, I never want to do that again. But he had an experience in the Amazon. They were researching and experimenting with psychedelic compounds there, and one morning, he describes it as being lightly intoxicated on mushrooms. He said, to my credit, he says, I was familiar with all hallucinogenic drugs and their effects. So I know what a hallucinogenic property is on my psyche. I know what to expect. This was not that. And he then described this UFO sighting that he had where he saw the Adamski flying saucer coming through the air. Such things are nonsense because we all know that photograph is hoaxed. It's proven, demonstrable, right? Long before it was discovered what the parts were made from, computer analysis said it's nonsense. But yet there it was for him. And so that's an experience, and I've had that reported to me by other people, even locally. One man had a tractor trailer floating over his home, over his barn rather. Lights, tanker truck, the whole bit. It was there. His family, they all saw it. It was there. Another woman reported an upside-down Star Trek Enterprise over a field. I mean, this stuff does get reported. People have reported TIE fighters. These kinds of things do happen. But these are experiences that you're not, I mean, the average person is not inclined to talk about these in public.
Well, sure, because they sound so ludicrous.
Absolutely. So, my thing is, okay, well, here's what I photographed in my hallway. It ain't much, but it's interesting. And so if we try to engage this, will it respond or won't it? And I don't know. I have a good feeling it might. And if it doesn't, then we try something else. Either way, there's something going on here.
And where can people find the project again?
That is at gofundme.com, and it's a / and then it's Project Oculus. And it sounds just like it sounds. It's spelled just like it sounds, rather. Oculus. O-C... Oh, God. Here I go. O-C-U-L-U-S? Oculus?
I believe so.
Okay. Getting late. But yeah, that's where you can find. And again, if you go to GoFundMe.com and search paranormal, I come up. It'll be somewhere on one of those pages. You'll find it. And But you can go to paratopiaoculus.com, and there's a link there in the show description for this week. There's a link there. But we'll see what happens. I'm really encouraged by the feedback that I've gotten so far. We've got some enormous donations, which is like beyond anything I expected. I really didn't expect it to take off like it has. But we're well on our way. Cool. And so, we could use one last push to kind of get us over a hurdle, and then we can start getting stuff going here.
All right, we're back with Jeff Ritzmann, and I guess now we should get into some of the weird things that happened later in life to you. But I did have one question about your earlier life. I remember you on Project Archivist saying something that you did have a counselor who had who like when you explained your experiences to her, she actually had similar ones.
That was in elementary school. And that was a really brief period there where, excuse me. See, I've rambled on so much, I've completely lost my voice. Sorry, audience, for that. I had a guidance counselor at the elementary school who was an older lady, and when she retired, I was probably in 4th or 5th grade, and we got a younger lady, and I was sent to see her about sleep. And when I explained to her what it was about, she got to talking to me about art class and how I really showed a lot of aptitude for that, and and what was I doing? Were my parents doing anything to foster? I said, oh yes, they're sending me to classes on the weekends and this, that, and the other. And she says, do you like it? I said, I love it. And she says, okay, now let's get to why you're not sleeping at night and what's going on. And I just said, you know what? It's safe here. She seems really nice. I'm just going to spill it. And I spilled it. And I told her what happened. And she got she looked at me very intensely. And I thought, oh, I'm in trouble. Like, I got the feeling like I was going to get in trouble. And I felt like I was going to get in trouble. And this is an interesting thing about experiencers, is that when they get together in a group and they talk about these things very openly with other experiencers, that's the feeling that they walk away from, or walk away with, is that they feel like they've told a secret they shouldn't tell, like they're not supposed to be talking about this. This is a very common thing. And so, the guidance counselor said, well, I said, I know nobody believes me when I say this. They all think I'm dreaming, and I know I'm not dreaming. And she said, well, I don't think you're dreaming either. And she said, I've had things very similar to what you describe. And I said, you do? What is it? What does it mean? And she's like, I have no idea. But, and she told me basically what a counselor that I saw in my 30s, I think, told me. He said the same thing, is there are things that we just can't explain about human experience. And I think he described it best. He said, there are people who really have peak human experience, and that's what this is. And there is no explaining it. And, he said, you're welcome to investigate it, but it can be extremely toxic, and it can be, it can lead to obsession, and it can, which is, which is another way that it manifests itself. The more attention you pay, the more you poke it, blank doesn't stink till you stir it. That's the kind of, that's kind of the modus operandi of a little bit, in a way, of this stuff, if that makes any sense. That's just kind of how it seems to play out. And then again, that falls all within the marginality, the anti-structure, and all that. It's easily dismissible. For the believer, there's no more proof that's needed. For the skeptic, it's easily dismissed. So this is just the way it works. So you got to work within that.
Now, you had a very weird experience in your teens where you lost, I wouldn't say you lost time, you lost distance, sort of.
Yeah, gained distance, yeah. Yeah. Lost a lot of respect from my family members about knowing how to drive and being trusted with a car. Yeah, I mean, the long and short of it was, I live in Maryland, so we have Ocean City, Maryland. And having the car, I wanted to drive my car down, and we went down pretty frequently. I mean, I went down without issue, had a great time. My parents drove their car, I drove mine, so I could tool around Ocean City as much as I wanted. And on the way home, for non-Marylanders, which I assume is a lot of you, you have to go over a couple of bridges, the Francis Scott Key Bridge and the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. So the Chesapeake Bay Bridge on the way home is the first bridge that you encounter, the first big one. And we were just about to it, and that usually meant you were most of the way home. And I lost sight of where my dad was. I did not know how to drive there. I had to follow him. And Dad is a chronic lane changer. Like, he's not satisfied with a lane. He has to be in, like, first position, right? So my dad's an old stock car driver, so he always wants to be in first. So, I was beside of him, and a tractor trailer went between us, and I kept an eye. But when the tractor trailer had gone by us, I looked, and he was getting off on an exit. So I panicked. I got off on the next exit. And wound up going down the street. All of this happens within no more than 20 to 25 minutes to maybe a half an hour in totality, to where I end up at the end of this, which, I find a store at the end of the street, and there's a guy there. His car is broken down. Again, his car looks odd, but I couldn't describe it to you. He had a Cleveland Browns shirt on. I went over to the payphone. That's how he got to talk. And I went over to the payphone. He goes, "Payphone doesn't work." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, the convenience store is closed. Looks like it's been closed." I said, "Which way is the Bay Bridge from here? Is it to my left? Is it down this way?" "Yeah, straight up that road. Go a little bit. Blah, blah, blah." I said, "Great." He said, "Hey, I hate to ask you this, but I'm broke down here. Could you maybe drive me up the street? My house is literally like 2 minutes up the street." I said, "Yeah, sure," which I had never picked up a hitchhiker before, but he looked okay to me, as they say. And, he got in, and at the time I had a 1970 Ford Torino GT. And it was ridiculously fast. And we're going down the road, and I think there may have been a couple of small talk about the car, and it began to get a little dark. It was getting dark when I stopped. Again, this is all within a very short period of time. And I get to kind of a dark spot on the road where it's a 2-lane road, and I see it, I don't know, like I guess a stone driveway going back into the woods. And he says, "What? This is me." I said, "Okay." I said, "If you don't mind, I'm going to drop you off here," because I'm thinking, I'm not going back there with him. I don't know who this guy is, and I don't like the look of that, right? So it's probably fine, but I'm letting him off here. So about that time, you've got that twilighty look about things. It's just enough darkness to get confused about, signs on the road and all that. And so I flipped the lights on, and he's not getting out, and I'm kind of like, I don't know, looking out the front, and I'm going, "So it's straight up here? As I just keep going straight?" He's like, yeah, just keep going straight. And I look over at him, and again, this is where it falls apart for most people. This man looked nothing like the man who got in the car with me. Nothing. This was not a trick of light and shadow. His skin was abnormally smooth. And it was just not the same man. It didn't resemble him. The clothes did. The clothes were the same. The face was different. And it was startling. And I just found myself, when I looked at him, I kind of looked at a quarter of my eye, and then when I finally turned my head completely to look at him, I just kind of froze. And I didn't know what to say, and I kind of mumbled something that I don't remember. And he opened the door, and the dome light came on in the ceiling. And he said, "It's good." He said something akin to, "You're okay. It's going to be okay." And I said, okay. And he said, I'll see you again. And I said, okay. I didn't ask, what does that mean? I just said, okay. And he got out of the car and shut the door. Man, I'm telling you what, that 351 Cleveland never tore so fast away from somebody. I put it to the floor. And I'm kind of looking back like, is he chasing me? Like, I don't know what's going on. This is just very strange. And just really unsettling. So I drive literally what seemed about 3 miles up the road. And I come to a cross street that looks a hell of a lot like a place called Route 40 in Maryland. A lot of businesses, a lot of truck stops and whatnot. It's a truck stop right there on the corner. I pull in. I go in, I tell them I'm lost, I don't know where I am. Where's the Bay Bridge? How do I get to Bay Bridge from here? And the waitress at the counter goes, Bay Bridge. I'm not, I said, Chesapeake Bay Bridge, the Bay Bridge, to go to Baltimore. One of the truck drivers down the end on the, like in the little booth says, boy, you are lost, ain't you? I'll never forget that guy's voice. And I was like, I guess so. And he comes over and unfolds a map, and he said, you're right here. And I was in the southern tip of Ohio. Now that, logistically, is impossible.
Right.
I didn't have enough gas for that. I hadn't driven that long. It's like, no, this is not getting lost. This is serious now because how am I getting home? So I began blubbering like a fool and crying. They called, the police came.
How old were you at the time?
I think I was 17.
Okay.
Pretty sure I was.
Well, that's a pretty reasonable response considering your situation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. A little embarrassing. I was genuinely embarrassed when I walked out of the place. I just said, I don't know how I'm even getting home. And I tried calling to the house. I did have enough change and some money in my pocket from the weekend that I could make some phone calls and try to get, I called my mom and dad, couldn't get them, called the neighbors across the street who were very close to us and couldn't get them. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm reasonably sure, and I can't remember anymore. Again, I'm almost 50 now. I'm pretty sure they told me it was close to 6 hours to get home.
Wow.
And I said, I don't even know how to get home. How am I going to get home? I said, I don't have gas for this, So.
And this is not modern day where you can also just plug it into a GPS.
No, there was no, I didn't even have a cell phone then. I mean, there was no cell phones for,
right.
I mean, that was for the uber millionaires, but it ended up that the waitress then came out and she felt really sorry for me. She was super sweet. And she gave me this money and a bag of food, and she said, they all collected this for you, and they really feel bad. And this man he's going to DC, and he's going right by where you should be able to know where you're at. So you can just follow him, and he'll take you all the way practically home. And I said, okay, and and the state cop said, is there anything else you need? I said, no. I mean, they collected well over $100 for me. Nice. And I thought that was, that again just made me completely turn into a puddle. And so I filled the car up with gas, and then that tractor trailer was waiting beside that street for me, and down we went. And, never passed that convenience store, never saw it wasn't there. And I walked in the door about very close to, 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm thinking, man, am I going to get it? I'm not going to be able to sit down for a week, because the whole time I'm going, I'm like, I can't lose this truck driver, because if I lose him, I don't know where I'm going. And I have a map, but can I figure it out to know where to go? And it ended up, I did lose him somewhere towards the end of the trip, but he got me most of the way home.
Right.
And I just thought, I can't stop to call, because if I stop to call and they're out looking, God, they've probably contacted police. They're out looking. I rolled in the driveway. My dad's truck was in the driveway. And I went in the house and tried to set my keys down quietly. And I was so tired. I was so tired. It was ridiculous. And my dad comes walking out in his underwear and T-shirt out of the back room. And he says, where you been? I said, Dad, you're not going to believe how lost I got. I tried to tell him the entire story about what had happened. And he was completely nonplussed about it. He said, all right, well, get in there and get to bed. It's whatever o'clock in the morning. Get to bed. You're going to wake up your mother. That was it. That was it. Nothing? Really? Nothing? This is not my father. I don't know who this is, but this is not my father. No, it was my dad. But, I mean, again, just like Mom with It's a Weather Balloon, it was kind of like, you weren't out looking. Why were you not out looking for me?
Right.
I mean, it just made no sense. And I remember telling my papa, my mom's dad, I said, Pop, he wasn't even out looking for me. And he's like, well, I can't explain that either, because if I'd have known that you weren't home, I would have been out looking for you. And I was like, right. So he's like, I don't know. It's very strange. And I was like, well, it is very strange. And, but Pop believed where I was. And I'm telling you, I've moved since then. I moved, I moved out of my house to an apartment, and I moved from there to a condo, and I moved from there to my house that I'm living in now. Somewhere in this menage of stuff, I've got the pack of matches I took from the counter of that place, and I just need to find it. That's the marginal part of the story. I have the match packs. Not that that means anything. It would only mean something to me, but I would love to know what the name of that place was. And
right. To know exactly where you were. Yeah.
But that kind of thing, like that never, it was that one time. It's never happened again. But you talk about displacement. Crap. I mean,
yeah.
I just, that was one of the more, like serious fear of being in trouble, or serious fear of like, when I get home, there's going to have to be police there because they're going to have to be looking for me. Like, really, that's...
Sure. Yeah.
Nobody was looking for me.
They got home, you weren't there, and they just went to bed.
Apparently. And apparently Dad was like, well, maybe we don't need this kid. He's the only one we got, but maybe we need to rethink this, If he's gone, he's gone. What are you going to do, Judy, But, that was really very bizarre. I mean, I to this day, I mean, again, that's something I've remembered all these years, and I never made the connection for what that meant or what that was. Never heard of such a thing. Who would have ever believed that?
Yeah. Yeah.
They think, now you're out messing with some girl. No, I wasn't. I swear I wasn't. But it wasn't until years later that you began hearing these kinds of things on these tabloid TV shows. So-and-so ended up, in this place where he should have been here, and this is called this, and I don't know. It just slowly you turn around to the idea that something is going on in your life, and it's not what other people have going on.
Right. Right.
And you're a weirdo, and that's just the way you are.
So did this stuff calm down at some point for a little bit?
Yeah. I'd say probably. My college years were pretty vacant of anything. And that was an extremely anti-structural type of life at college. So there was that. And I would say right up until I was engaged to my wife. I was engaged to my wife, and here's bizarre for you. I'll say this at the risk of embarrassment, because after all, look what we're talking about. How embarrassed can I be? We're all space cadets. You have to make the best of it. I was in the bathroom taking a leak at my mom's house. My future wife was there talking to my mom in the kitchen. And as I'm finishing, I get a extreme pain in my navel, and as I look down, something comes out of my navel and hits the wall with some force, and it's blood. And the first thing that goes through your mind when this happens is, I'm coming untied. I mean, that's a bizarre thought, right? But this is what I thought. I thought, oh my God.
It's reasonable.
Oh my God. I put my hand on my stomach, and I'm like, oh, that's blood. It's blood. And it smelled. And I'm like, what is this? So, and it didn't happen like that again when I urinated, in the day after that. But I went to the doctor the next day, and he takes the thing that he looks in your ear with, and he sticks it in my belly button. He's got a real long one. He sticks it in my belly button. He pushes way farther than I thought a belly button could go. and he says, this is the conversation. He says, huh. And he's looking around. I'm like, Doc, you got to put some jelly on that thing. It's killing me. And he's like, what are you into? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he says, been sticking anything down in here? I said, why in the hell would I stick anything in my belly button? I don't know. I'm just asking. I don't know what you kids are into. I said, I'm not into that. He says, well, if you could look, I'd let you look. He said, but there's 3 or 4 pin marks in here arranged in a circle at the base.
Oh.
And he said, I don't know how that had happened. And I said, well, I don't either. He said, unless you stuck something in there. And I said, I ain't stuck anything in there. He said, wish we could take a picture because I'd love for you to see it. It's a perfect circle.
Wow.
Of 3 or 4. He said, they look like needle marks. Now, what is that? What is that? And this was the last words he said to me. And he didn't really detail it very much. He said, I don't know, Jeffrey, you get some really strange, S-H-I-T, right? I'm like, right. Okay. Well, there you are. I don't know what to say about that.
And it was never connected to anything?
I've thought about that, and not that I can really think of. I had moved into an apartment, and Lisa, my wife, and I, we had experienced some, I guess what people would call haunting experiences. In the house where it was in an old brownstone house that I rented, and I lived in the upstairs, and 2 college girls lived in the bottom, and I would go up the stairs and into my locked door, and as we would get up the stairs and go into the door, you heard every door in the apartment close, and there were many closets, big closets in this place. You would hear every door in there closing.
Oh, wow.
And I'd look at her, and she'd look at me. She'd go, what was that? I said, I don't know. But I do remember, and I can't, again, this is why it's important, everybody out there listening, if you're having experiences, keep a journal. Date it, time it. This is crucial, because when I got out of this for years, I threw all that away because I just wanted rid of this stuff. And I threw all that stuff away. I got rid of it because I didn't want anything to do with this field anymore. But now, here I am. Again, I'm back in it. Now I'm back in it for, 10, 12 more years. And I wish I had this stuff, because then I could really tell what events coincided with what things. And
well, and I mean, I've been keeping notes since about 1990.
Uh-huh.
And there's times where I stopped keeping notes, and I regret that now.
Yeah.
Because my memory sucks.
Oh.
It really does. I mean,
it's worse as you get older, dude. Trust me.
The stuff I remember actually pretty dead on. When I've gone through the entries, I'm like, okay, I might have had like people switched around, but the actual event was remembered right. But there's a few years where I'm going, I know a lot of weird stuff happened, and I am at a loss to remember any of it in any kind of detail.
Yeah.
But it's also, I found really important, and I was told this when I started recording the stuff, to record the everyday stuff going on around it. And I was always like, well, why? Or shouldn't I just be recording the weird stuff? But now I'm seeing all these weird patterns.
Right, exactly.
In the normal stuff relating to the weird stuff.
That's exactly it. And that's really, and that's one of the parts of Project Oculus that's going to be, that's something that the people who donate are going to be able to access, which is a daily log of life in this house. So it's going to be brief, but it's going to say, what happened today in the house? How was Lisa's day? How was my day? How was my son's day? We all live here. Did the dogs do anything? Did the dogs tear up the floor? Did they sleep all day? What happened in the house? And then we keep this log. Every night I sit down for 5 minutes and I say, nothing much happened today. Had a good day at work, blah, blah, blah. That's important stuff, believe it or not. That's going to be important down the road if we get something interesting that you can look back and go, okay, that day is the day that we heard that, Aunt Molly died or whatever. So that kind of stuff can be important. I couldn't tell you. I had a very weird experience at the apartment that I guess a lot of people would deem UFO related, but there was no UFO. It was more along the lines of like hearing small kids running around in places that I couldn't see in the house, but like the kitchen. You can't see the kitchen from the bedroom, but you can hear little feet, things like that. And I remember that that particular night, I was in bed, in the middle of the bed, and was covered up. I'm pretty sure that it was cold, because this place, the landlord had control of the heat, which is a bad deal, kids, if you rent an apartment. And it was really cold. And when I woke up next to my 1975 Les Paul guitar, and I'm like, why is that in bed with me? Why is this not in its case in the living room? Why is this in bed with me? But it was. And I had no explanation for that. It was just a very strange thing to happen. I wasn't playing as I was sitting there. I went to bed. So I have no explanation for that. But it wasn't like I got up in the middle of the night. I'm a really, really light sleeper when it comes to getting up and going to the bathroom. I remember that, unlike a lot of people.
Right.
I'm not one of those like sleepwalking types. That's I've lived with a woman now for 25 years this year, and that's never happened. So, did that coincide with the belly button? I have no idea, but it was during that period in time.
When you talked about all the doors in the apartment building slamming, did other people notice this? I mean, was this something that you experienced?
Well, Lisa, she heard that on several occasions. We also saw somebody knocking at the door, which oddly enough we've experienced in our house now. She experienced it last week in the bathroom. Somebody knocking on the door to the point where the door was lightly moving. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like pounding, but somebody knocked at the door, and you could see the door moving slightly as the knocks happened. So it was... we saw that a number of times, her and I together, and then you'd open that door, and of course nobody would be there. So we got that a number of times. There were just very odd things that more along the lines lined up with like a poltergeist type activity to me. Now knowing what I know, glasses put in weird spots in the house. Chessboard pieces moved that weren't moved before. Somewhat subtle things, but really noticeable stuff. Chest of drawers having all the handles balanced upside down. You touch them and they fall. Had that twice there, and then once in the temporary house that I lived in while our condo was being built. So there was that. So poltergeist type stuff, weird stuff. And the girls downstairs actually commented on that one time, because I said, we didn't talk very much, but I was downstairs and one of them was vacuuming the foyer, and she says, "Isn't this a great house?" I said, "It really is." I said, "A little weird sometimes, though, isn't it?" She just looked at me. She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know. We have some weird things happen." She goes, "What do you mean, like ghosts?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Carrie, come out here!" And I told them, and they just looked at each other and like went, "Oh my God!" And I'm like, "Why, do you see?" She's like, "I'm not talking about this. That's it." So obviously they'd seen something or heard something, but they didn't want to discuss it, so I didn't press it.
Right.
But yeah. And most of my experiences now that were somewhat important in my thought process with this stuff, most of it now since I've been married has happened with other people. In fact, a lot of it has happened with other people. Some friends, we've lost a lot of friends over this. That I think is the most distressing part about it. Is the way that the phenomena can alienate you. Pardon the pun, but it's true. You will lose friends. You will spook people out. Some people will just, stay away from you because they think you're nuts. But,
Sure.
yeah. But that is part of how this works, too. Isolation is a big deal with this, and that's why it is important to talk about even the most bizarre aspects of it openly. Because if we keep doing that, then sooner or later this becomes something that everybody can comfortably talk about. So I don't mind being the whipping. I'm an artist. Everybody thinks I'm a weirdo anyway, so I don't really care. It is what it is, and there's nothing I can do to change it or make it more palatable for people. So that's not my job. I'm just trying to make some kind of headway in this in some way before, the curtain falls on us all at some point. So you got to do what you can.
And where did this progress to beyond this whole poltergeist activity?
I guess for lack of a better way to put it, Lisa and I got married, bought our first place. The condo was our first place, and strange things started to be seen there. There was a long hallway with a bathroom at one end, and Lisa and I would routinely see, and my parents for that matter, my mom would see it routinely, house guests would see it fairly frequently, somebody walking in and out of the bathroom. More silhouette type thing, not really like you can describe what it looks like. It's more like a silhouette, but clearly someone coming in and out of the bathroom. We were on a second floor condominium, so it was a good, 10, 12 feet off the ground. And Lisa saw a head go walking by out the window one day. Really freaked her out.
I'm sure.
Light phenomena in the house to some degree, but not as much as what we have now. Mainly a lot of voices, and that's when I began to say to myself, okay, there's definitely something here as far as paranormal stuff goes. Like, there's ghosts here. Like, what is the history of this place? It's a new place. It's brand new.
Right.
And you find out that it's the area that used to be all mostly farmland, and then you find out that not far from where I lived is where I live now was the original port of Baltimore. So it was very colonial-esque ship port. And so a lot of, again, very anti-structural stuff going on, a lot of liminal states going on, ships coming and going. So historically, there's a lot of liminality going on around here. But then you find out that when you talk to people like George Hansen, that, well, yeah, apartments and condominiums, people come and go. It's always in a state of transition. And so ghost activity is much more heavily reported in condominiums and apartments than they are private homes. Anybody know that? I didn't, but it's true.
No, I had no idea.
But it is actually true. And so, when you start thinking about liminal places, an apartment is a very liminal place. It's a stopover. Most people don't live their lives in an apartment. Most people, it's a transitional place to live.
Sure, sure.
And a condo is the same way. That's a very liminal place to live because you're going to have children. You're going to want to raise your children in a home of your own that you don't share with a bunch of other people. Plus, you've also got other people coming and leaving and having kids and moving, and so it's always in that state of flux. So all of that played in. By the way, our upstairs neighbor reported weird stuff in his condominium. Our downstairs neighbors, before they moved, reported weird things in the sky. There was a round patch of dead grass out front of the condo that a couple of house guests saw and said, "That's weird, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's weird." Particularly when you hear your downstairs neighbor saying it was right over there, and then they came and they sat down right there. This was a conversation we heard off the deck one day. And so, okay, I'm intrigued, okay, because now I start to describe these experiences from my childhood to my wife, and I had described them to some detail before we were married, but then I really opened up about a lot of other strange things that I didn't really put my finger on. And I remember, I'll never forget this. And here's where this gets extremely marginal for me, because you could easily dismiss this. We're watching a show called, I think it was Encounters or Sightings. I think it might have been Sightings. It was a little earlier for Encounters, but Sightings was on. And they were talking about a UFO case, a landed UFO in some place, and it was very interesting. And I said, that's fascinating. I said, because up where my father's business is, it's extremely rural. And it's where my dad grew up, where my grandmother lived. I said, we ought to go up there and just look around. So Lisa and I, we had just had our son, and he was, I don't know, he wasn't newborn, but we had been out a few times since we had him, and so we dropped him off at Mom's, and we just took a ride. And long story short, we saw some lights, were very strange. We pulled over to the side of the road to look at them. They turned off right in front of us. They were clearly off the ground. I didn't know what it was. We pulled up a little further, pulled off the road. She wanted me to move my son's car seat into the back of the truck so that she could get a better look if we saw something again. Mm-hmm. And so I got out of the truck to put his car seat in the back. I had a cap on the truck, so I opened it up. And as I put the car seat in, as it literally touched the inside of the truck, there was a bright flash to my right. And to the right was where all of the wilderness was, all of the rolling hills of trees and blackness, frankly. And I look over to see a light kind of wavering in the air. It looks like a firework, but going lateral. And I've got this pain in my upper arm, shoulder area that feels like sucker punched, like really hard. Right. It put me on my knees. It hurt so bad. And I looked over. As I looked over, I thought, I'm going to see somebody swinging something at me, but instead I see this light. And it winks out right over top the trees. There's a tree line, I don't know, several yards off the road. There's a lot of field between me and the trees. And it's right by a CMP telephone switching station, or, where there's trucks parked and there's a fenced area where they park the trucks. And so there's a little garden set right beside this parking lot, and I'm beside the road. And I look over and I see Lisa, and she rolls down the window. She says, "We need to go." I said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "Yeah, we need to go now." And I said, "Well, wait a minute, because did you see where it winked out over there?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, it's just to the left here. And do you not see something right there, like right above the trees? There's something there." And we went back and forth a couple times, and she's like, "You need to go. We need to go." And I said, "Well, just give me a second." And I walked right to the back corner of the little garden that was beside this parking lot. And it was tilled up land. I don't know what was planted there, but I walked about halfway up, and I kind of knelt down, and I'm looking at a dim ring of really tiny, fine red lights. They're very small, and they're barely there. And the way I described them was, it was hard to look directly at them because you couldn't see them as well as if you looked just to the left or right. And I found out later on that this is a problem that astronomers have when they're viewing very dim stars. If they look to just the left or right, they become somewhat more visible in the kind of the side periphery vision, picks up these things better. Yeah. Apparently, this is something that astronomers deal with all the time. So I'm looking at this thing as best I can. And I know what it looks like. And the thought did occur to me, maybe you shouldn't be sitting here. Maybe you should get in the truck and go home, because it's enough already. But I'm going, well, I don't think that's what that is. I'm not sure what that is. And it's not moving, and it's nothing dramatic. And I said, well, I'm just going to, and Lisa, of course, is like, we need to go. I'm like, just hold on a minute. So I get up and I say, I'm going to walk just to the corner, the front or the back corner of this tilled up land, which would be towards the hedgerow a little bit more. So as I get up, I'm not taking my eyes off of it. I go to stand up, and it turns on. And again, I've said this so many times. It was not like a Close Encounters moment. It wasn't like, here's the big flying saucer. That was not it. It just went from being dim to very clearly visible.
Right.
Not blinding, not any of that nonsense. It just was there. And here it is. It's an oval ring of red lights, evenly spaced, with white lights now unevenly spaced between the red ones. And being the guy that I am, that was my first thought was, besides a list of expletives that I would never utter to anybody, and mind-numbing horror, my first thought was, those lights aren't spaced evenly on that thing. Like, that's really like, why is that white one so close to that red one and they're all off? Like, what is that? Like, and that was my first thought. Well, what is that? And then I realized what this is. And literally the first, I mean, that was a reactive thought with the lights, but my first cognitive thought was, this is how I die. Like, this is it. I'm dying. I'm dying. This is it. I'm over. They used to say to me, well, fear radiates from your chest outward. Well, I'm here to tell you that kind of horror radiated from my feet up. My feet wouldn't work, and it wouldn't work because I was paralyzed. It wouldn't work because, again, fear is such a trite word. Just absolutely blown away with the most mind-numbing horror that I could possibly even try to describe. And later years, I would say, was that really the reaction that I should have had? Like, what? I mean, but you don't know what it is. You don't know what it's doing. And now it clearly sees you, because my standing up made it do that. So it clearly knows I'm looking at it. Ugh. Right? So I'm standing there, and it starts to approach. And I look over at Lisa, and I really can't hear much of what she's saying. I can only see her going, "Let's go! Come on, run, do something." And I just looked back up at it, and at this point, some lights began to get brighter. I looked over at the truck again, and I could see light going across the truck and going into the trees, and it still makes me just a little bit queasy to see like a flashlight shown on tree limbs at night. Like, that's not a diggable image for me because of that. And that's really all that I remember until there's a disconnect here that I don't remember. That was the last thing I remember seeing was Lisa not screaming anymore, but just kind of like facing forward. And I was like, okay. I'm freaking out because all of this is going on and it's real and it's really happening. And this is the kind of crap you only see on TV. And now here I am, and I'm going to die from this. Like, this is it. And I don't get to say goodbye to anybody. Like, all this stuff is flooding through your head. And the next thing I know, I am extremely cold. I'm on my back. The surface is hard. Something smells. I don't know, sterile. It's a very like, it's not a clean smell. It's not a dirty smell. It's just there's a smell like kind of wet cardboard with some alcohol maybe or something like that. Like a very strange odor, but it smelled very sterile, very clean. and there was clearly someone to my right, although I was not looking. I could hear them moving around, and I was sobbing uncontrollably, screaming like a girl, because I remember what I sounded like, and I sounded like a girl. High-pitched wailing, and the thing to my right, or the person to my right, or whatever it was, is saying, open your eye. And I'm saying, no, F you, whatever. I can't even make coherent sentences. And I feel something brushing my eyelash, and it's getting perturbed at this point. It's saying, open your eye, with more force, more anger. And there's a sense of urgency going on, like we're under a time crunch or something.
Mm-hmm.
I just got that sense. Nobody said that. You get this feeling like there's an urgent need to move here. And then something approached up towards my head. And then all of a sudden I realized this voice is not audible. I'm hearing this like between my ears. It's coming from inside my head, which disturbed me greatly. And made everything all the more worse. And then something came up towards my head and asked me, was I scared? And I said, yes, I want to go home. I want out of here. I want out. And I literally, like, the thought occurred to me, I think I must be dead now. This is what it is. I'm dead. And this thing said, do you want to hold my hand? And I said, yes. I mean, because at that point you're reaching out for anything.
Right.
And I opened my hand, and it took my hand. And it wrapped all the way around my hand to my palm again. And at that point I felt like a complete release, like sinking into a warm bath. Like, that's it. And there I go. And the next thing I know, I'm getting in the truck, and I look at Lisa, and it's really hot in the truck. And I'm like, man, it's hot in here. She said, yeah. And I started the truck, which is odd because I never turned the truck off when I got out. So I start the truck, and it says 11:30. And I must have got out of the truck about 9:30. And I said, it's 11:30? And she goes, how did that happen? I said, I don't know. And, I've often said, if you know me and my wife, we talk to each other like there's a room full of people. Like, that's just what we are. We communicate with each other all the time over everything. And we drove home in complete silence. And when we got home, we picked the kid up, we got home, we put him to bed. I was in bed, and I felt like I wanted to cry. I just felt really upset. And my wife was in the bathroom, and I heard her shut the medicine cabinet from brushing her teeth, and I heard her crying. And when I heard her crying, it all came to me. Like, I knew everything that I just described to you. I remembered the sighting, but I didn't remember how it ended. But I knew something happened, but I didn't know what happened until I heard her crying. When she cried, I knew. And when she came in, she says, do you know? And I said, I know. And I told her what happened. She said, I know. And she's reading it back to me as I'm saying it to her. So we're confirming each other. And we don't know what each other is thinking. I'm saying, do you remember? And she's like, yes, and you did this. And I said, yes, and you did this. Well, she remembered. At some point, I was there, and there was a light, and then I wasn't there. And she said she was facing the front of the truck, and she saw somebody in the truck with her, and it was large. And she saw an eye, a large eye, squint. She said it was very dark, but she couldn't say it was the classic black eye thing. But it was dark, and it squinted, and she felt like she was floating. And at that point, she said everything went pink. And we kind of surmised that everything went pink because she closed her eyes. and the light flooded through her eyelids. That's the best explanation we can come up with. But then she said instantly, it was seamless, that I was getting in the truck and it was really hot and stuffy in the truck, and that was it. So we don't know. She does not want to. She cannot talk about that without falling apart, even to this day. Like, literally, if she tries to tell that story to somebody, she completely falls apart. And, and that was literally it for me. Like, I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, I don't need any more. I understand. I get it. So now what? And off we go, as we say. And there's been a lot more since then with other people, and, and it's, like I said, we're just not, we don't have a lot of friends. We just don't.
And how old were you when that happened to you, roughly?
I'm going to say around 23 or 24, maybe.
Okay. So
we had my son, like, we got married, and 6 months later she was pregnant. So my son was born. So I was probably, I lie, I was probably 25, 26, maybe somewhere in there, because I think I was 23 or 4 when I got married. So maybe a year or so after that. So yeah, I mean, he wasn't 1 yet. So yeah, he was still a real little baby. And that was it. I mean, at that point, met one of my closest friends of all time, which was the guy that I was told to contact by a friend of mine in the sign business. And we talked, and he said, well, what do you remember? And I told him, and he was, okay, I want you to do something. And I said, okay. He says, I want you to sit down with this pad, and I want you to really think over the next few days about all the weird things that you just told me. Write them down. But also remember everything in your life that you kind of like struck you odd, but you couldn't figure out. And you start seeing these things pop up. But the first words that he said to me, and his name was Lee, he said, how many UFOs have you seen in your life? And I said, oh, like 6. And he's like, most people don't see 1, right? And I was like, huh, is that right? And he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I've seen a lot too. And I was like, oh, okay. And then you realize, you connect the dots, and you go, okay, well, this is the reason for the Ohio thing. Like, that was probably some manifestation of this.
Right.
That, the nighttime, the early things from 5 to 9, this is what this was clearly that. But there was no ship. It's, as Whitley Strieber says in the movie, this happened in a house, Yeah. Why do you connect this with spacemen? Like, no, you don't. But I've been through all the, like, I don't mean to trivialize that for people, because everybody goes through that thinking it's extraterrestrials and they're here to study us, and you shouldn't be afraid, and it should be an interesting experience. You should be intrigued by this. I was never intrigued by this. All I could say was, why me? Haven't I got enough? I got enough. I got a kid to raise, and then it began to interact with him as a baby, and which quite
as a baby
with him as a baby, yes.
How did it interact with him?
Only the one story that I can tell you was I was in the living room, and again, this buggers belief for anybody with a child, especially a little baby. I was in my chair watching TV. Lisa had gone to bed already, and I heard my son Cody. I heard him kind of cooing and talking and yammering, as they do. And so I thought, well, maybe he needs to eat something. Maybe he's thirsty. Maybe I should just sit and rock him for a while. 'Cause I couldn't wait to have a kid. Like, I love kids, and he is still my life, even at 23 years old. But I was just so, like, this little sweet little baby of mine, and so I got up to go in his room to pick him up and bring him out. And in the dark, there was clearly something in his room. There was light coming in from the window. I could clearly see something large headed leaning over the bed. And I don't know how else to explain the communication was not, I didn't hear it in my head. I didn't hear it with my ears, but I got this sense of, I've kind of described it as a mad dog growling at you, but not moving on you. But kind of a if you had to put it in a humanistic term, if you had to put some kind of anthropomorphic wedge on it and say it was through gnashed teeth, a go out and sit down, through gnashed teeth, through closed teeth, like Nasty said. And I said, well, yeah, I'll do that. And I went out and I sat in my chair, and that was that. And in a couple minutes, he stopped talking, and I went in, and there he was, sound asleep, fit as a fiddle, nothing wrong, nothing disturbed. But he never cried of that. He never anything. But when I told my wife that, she was livid. And I said, you need to understand, there's nothing I could do. I mean, there's nothing, and this is one thing that I learned that made it easier for me, is that there is nothing you can do. In that situation, it's there, it's whatever it is manifested there, and it clearly doesn't want you around. And one of the things that I've always gotten from this phenomena, and I'm not sure if your experiences kind of say this to you, whenever I've been in the presence of whatever they are, if it's even a they, I get the sense of extreme age, like ancient.
Oh, yeah.
What is that? I don't know what that is. But in my head, I always think of elder people are the smart ones. They know, they can tell me what to do, and I have to do it. That's just, there's a certain way you're raised, you listen to your elders. Well, this is like the ultimate elder to me. It's like, go sit down. Everything's fine, go sit down. But it's said in a way that's very authoritative. And there's not the option to say no. This is what people don't get. Like a normal dad, they would say, would rush in there and beat the crap out of this thing for being near your newborn baby.
Sure.
You don't have that option. People don't get that it does something to you that doesn't allow you to act on those kind of feelings. You're not in that kind of space in that experience. You cannot react that way. It's not in you to react that way. Here's the other thing you hear. Well, if you saw the UFO for, I don't know, a minute, why didn't you get a camera? Because that's not in you to do that. That's not what's important to you in that moment. Your importance is keep your eyes on it. What's it going to do now? But people without the experience, they don't understand that. And that's a very hard thing to try and explain to somebody, why you don't act to make an effort to gather, because proof is the last thing on your mind. Well, it's right there. Proof of anything.
We've also found in some of our roundtable discussions that a lot of times, people will have an experience. It's a really weird experience. It should freak them out, and then they go to bed.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like, well, that just seems odd, It's like you should be all freaked out and not able to sleep, and instead you're just like, oh, okay.
Well, I was not able to sleep. Like Lisa and I had something fairly recently, as far as history goes, of a thing in the bedroom with us that clearly had a big head. We had not seen anything like this in ages, and never had we seen. And again, tell me if this feels familiar to you. You sense this about this thing. That when you're in the presence of this thing, that there is clearly some kind of altered state going on.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not high. It's just something else. There's a different feeling to reality that is almost more real than real. In other words, things that seem inanimate, like a chair, become not something more than what they are, not anything so dramatic as that, but just everything seems to have a buzz to it when this thing is in the presence of. There's just something about the air is different. I believe, whatever it is, it brings something of its place to here. And I think that might be what that is. That's just a guess, purely speculation.
Well, you get that term "more real than real" too from people who have had things like near-death experiences.
Yes.
So it may be that altered state that we're picking up on that's more real of reality, like than what we're experiencing normally.
Right. And I'm sure part of that is also the stressful shock of seeing something that you don't understand. I get that. That's probably part of it too. But, but this experience that Lisa and I had, we didn't talk about it. Like, I woke up in the middle of the night and there it is. It's standing there. But I can't make up my mind what I'm looking at. Now, the guy talking to your audience right now, I would immediately know what that was if I turned around right now and saw it. I would run like hell, right? I get it. In this mindset, when I wake up out of a dead sleep and I'm staring wide awake, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at something standing there. I get up on my elbow, it leans away from me. I said, did that just move, or what is that? Like, that must be something on the desk that's catching the light in just the right way to... No, moron. Something is standing there with a very large round head. Okay? What do? Flop back down and go to sleep. I'll figure it out in the morning.
Yeah.
Are you serious? I don't say anything to my wife. 2 days later, I believe it was 2 days or a day or so later, a friend comes over for a visit, and he's saying, anything weird happened in the house lately? Because he knows the history of what we've seen here. He's seen some of it himself. Anything weird going on? And I said, well, nothing in this room. I said, but I don't think I want to tell Lisa what I saw in the bedroom the other night. And she looks at me and she goes, I already know. Thing standing beside the bed with the big head. And I'm like, are you serious? You did not just say that. Well, that made it all too real for me, because I had thought the whole next day, like, what was that? There was nothing on the desk to make that shape. What was that? And I know what it looked like, but is that what it was? Well, she woke up, saw it, and then squinted her eyes, rubbed her eyes, didn't see it, rubbed her eyes again, saw it again. It was intermittent for her. And but she did see it. She said, yeah, it had very thin shoulders, very large head, like a little bigger than a basketball. Very thin shoulders, and it was just standing there staring at you. And I'm like, what was it doing besides that? She goes, I don't know. I woke up when you flopped down. So that was how that transpired. I didn't sleep for a week, dude. I didn't sleep. I went to bed at 5:30 a.m. every morning. And slept for like 4 hours until 9. I mean, brutal. And I finally, I talked to some people that basically just said to me, it's a pass-through. There's a little bit more to that story that makes it completely implausible and paints me in a really ridiculous light, which is that we had a rather large quartz crystal out in the lawn that had been there for 6 years or so. 4 years at the time, probably. And I put it to my forehead. Just playing around. I did nothing else different that would essentially be anything different than what I had done any other weekend. It's a completely normal weekend. That was the only thing I had done. And when I mentioned this to a couple researchers that I know, they go, what, are you crazy? I'm like, what do you mean? I don't believe in crystal nonsense. I don't buy it. And They said, well, regardless of whether you buy it or not, it is a method of, like scientists and electronics people, they use this to store energy. Crystals store energy. That's all you need to know. You don't have to believe any of the other crap. But just know there is something to that. And if you had one outside for that long a time, you don't know what's been done to it or what it's collected. I said, I don't know that it's a rock, dude. Like, seriously. Well, I got news for you. That's the only thing that I did, and everybody tells me that's why that thing showed up. I'm like, well, that completely marginalizes the entire event to me. which is perfect in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
Right? Because I don't believe in crystal crap. Like I don't buy it. I'm sorry, I just don't. Magic rocks? Really? No. Well, I now know there is something to that. Now, here's the problem. And as I said to Jeremy on one of our last programs, is that the phenomena trying to marginalize itself through me trying to marginalize the event by saying the guy believes in crystals? What, are you kidding me? Right? Or is there really something to a quartz crystal left outside for 6 years in the elements, the snow, the rain, the wind, everything?
Huh.
I don't know. I don't know what to think of that. I know what I saw. And here's the caveat to that vision of seeing this thing standing there in the room. I was not in that altered feeling of reality. There was no it was like it was standing there like I'm standing here. There was no weirdness surrounding this. It didn't communicate anything to me. It just stood there and stared at me. That was really unsettling, in that there was no. The only buffer was go to sleep, figure it out in the morning. You know, that doesn't make any sense. You know, and people have asked me, the questions you get when you describe something like this is, well, how to get in the house? Well, that's the last thing you're concerned about, how to get in the house. I don't know. You know, maybe the dogs let it in. I don't know. I mean, you know, these are the questions people ask you. Like, the question is, what was it doing there? You know, that was a mind blower for me and a game changer. Because I got to think, if I did that again, I'd see it again.
Have you tried it?
No. Are you kidding me? I like sleep. No? No.
I would totally try it.
Well, a friend of mine over in the UK wants me desperately to send it to him. Here's my problem. I have to touch it to send it to him, and I'm not touching it. I'm sorry. I am a grown 50-year-old man afraid of a rock. See, this is what it does to you people. You know, you don't get it. This is what it does. You know? I mean, I don't know what to say about that experience, although I tell you, that was one of the more viscerally real. I mean, it doesn't sound like much in the grand scheme of other things that I've experienced, but that was like being at work and having them walk into work and say, "Hey, we're here." What? I mean, it was so in your face. I was not sleepy. I wasn't paralyzed with fear. I wasn't anything. I just kind of looked and went, "What is that?" And knew perfectly well what it is. Makes no sense. But there it was. And it was very much solid and very much there. I do take some solace in that when I leaned towards it, it leaned away from me. Right. That's interesting, right? I mean, that's a good takeaway. So what's that mean? I don't know. I guess we'll find out one day, but that whole experience was, I thought, am I back on the, am I back to being the scared guy all the time, afraid to take the trash out at night? Is that coming again? Because I don't want that. And so, you tell yourself what you have to make yourself go to sleep again. And I don't know what more to say about it than that. It was incredibly visceral to me.
Now, you did have another experience with someone in was it a cloak?
Yeah. Well, here's where everything blows. Your audience is now saying, well, I was with this guy until this.
Well, this part, what it reminded me of when I heard you talk about it on Project Archivist, it reminded me of Strieber's key.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's different, but there are some experience he's related, not even just the key, are very similar to this.
I think the only thing that I can say about this is that I kind of file this away, and I was always somewhat suspicious of it, even the effect that it had on me at the time. life is never so good when you have something that every once in a while scares the bejesus out of you. And one day it comes to you and says, that's over. Like, it's going to be good from here on out. And it is. There's nothing better in life than that. I can tell you that. Nothing. I mean, that'll put you on a cloud. Like, it's over. Whatever it was, I got through it, and now I've gotten to the good part. Like, I'm finally going to get the ice cream sundae, right? And then at some point, you know, you realize that the ice cream sundae is made out of styrofoam and doesn't taste good, and you don't really want it around anymore, and it obliges you, you know. But yeah, I mean, this gets really long and involved, and I don't, you know. I was awoken one night out of my bed, and I was asleep and I was awake. I heard somebody, and I opened my eyes, and there was a very large man standing in the doorway to my bedroom. And I, like most people, threw my feet over the bed to get up and run at him or run out of the room or something. And he put his hand up as if to say stop, and everything just melted away from me. Now this was, I can say that there was that, we've talked about the kind of weird, kind of altered state that you feel in this situation. Well, that was there, but not quite as overbearing as a buzzing or something like that. This was very calm. I mean, very calm, like ridiculous. And I just thought, oh, okay, that's fine. I followed him down the stairs. Long story short, I am somehow maneuvered into a position where I'm sitting cross-legged on the floor with him. He's very real. I mean, he's very, very there. To the point where my dog smelled him and ran away. But she saw him, didn't bark, had ears down, and was curious, but curious enough just to take a sniff and then run back upstairs. And he just talked. That's really it. I mean, he was not satisfied, oddly enough, until we were sitting cross-legged on the floor. And he wasn't satisfied until our knees were touching. He wore a black, one sheet of black material, very black. The material seemed to have a quality to it that seemed like granular static, to sort of an overlay of a staticky look to it. Very hard to explain what that felt like, or seemed like it was made of something other than material. And it covered most of his eyes and nose. It covered down to about the bridge in his nose. You could see his mouth. You could see his chin. The cheeks. He looked young. It was hard to tell age, but again, that feeling of very old was very much there. But there was also this smell of pine and grass and water and rain, like all kind of mixed together. Very, I don't know, earthy, I guess, smells. And he talked like a person. I didn't hear it in my head. He started out talking like a person, and every once in a while it would gravitate into my head and then back out again, through a couple of different experiences. And I don't mean to be vague about it, but I think most of the first discussion we had was about me. It was about why I am the person I am, and why I do the things I do, and how I view things, and how I viewed my family, and why I was angry at certain people. And it was very introspective, which was kind of weird. But the first things that he said to me was, I said, "Are you one of them?" And he kind of snickered. And and he said, your human experience with this is about to change. And, it wasn't going to be scary aliens and all of that. And that was kind of gone over about why it was scary. And, you're really thick, he says. You're really hard to reach. I didn't know if he meant me or I took it as me, but because I was slightly offended at that. But meanwhile, I'm just kind of dreamy at this guy. I'm just kind of looking at him and I'm going, wow, like this is really happening. I'm really sitting here on the floor and, again, those common thoughts like I should wake my wife up. Like that doesn't happen. You just sit there and you listen to what's being said to you. And, and there were some personal, things that were said to me that really cracked my egg. And it wasn't anything that would benefit anybody else. But at the end of it, I got up and he made me open the door for him and he walked down the street. That was it. And I was told this is not for public consumption. I was told this is not something that needs to be talked about publicly yet. And I said, okay. And consequently, I tried to talk about it because I was so blown away by what had happened. I went back upstairs. I got in bed. I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning and I was completely, I guess the word Jeremy uses for me was I was completely blissed out. And when I called him to tell him about it, he goes, you're even talking different. Like you're talking really slow and really calm. Like I wasn't worried about anything. And again, it wasn't like I was high or drunk or anything like that. It was just this feeling of inner calmness, peace. Like I finally had some sense of peace about things. And that would wane away over the course of maybe 3 or 4 days. It would start to, like the world would start to intrude again, right?
Right.
And this person would show up every now and then out of, usually at late hours, usually when I was getting ready for bed. I came out of my guitar room one day and he walks out of a back bedroom and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I said, you've got to stop doing this. But you got to understand that for me, this was like, the best way to describe it is, I felt like finally in this ocean of weird crap, I finally have something that's there that feels like a friend and wants to teach me something. And I'm all about learning whatever he wants to show me.
Right.
And I'm trying to, so some other stuff went on and I tried to talk about it on the show with Jeremy. And at one point I was outside because that's one of the things he told me to do is to go outside and sit quietly and just listen, and we'll be able to communicate better that way, whatever that means. Right? So I'm going out sometimes at night, sitting in the backyard and just listening. And I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. But I went out one night after me and Jeremy had recorded this bit of telling people what I had experienced with this man. And something, all of a sudden I'm looking at the ground, all of a sudden I'm looking up at the tops of the trees in my backyard, and something has me slammed up against the gazebo door that we have in the backyard. And I hear the words, "Why?" audibly. And it lets loose of me, and I get up and I run inside, and I'm freaking out. I call Jeremy, and I say, there's no way we can air this. You've got to erase it. Because something just threw me up against the shed and wants to know why I'm talking. So the next night we try again. And I try to be more vague about it. I'm trying to describe it without really describing it. I'm trying to say, I think this is okay. I feel like I'm okay saying this. And I try to describe some more. And that night, I wake up to the feeling of like I'm in a slap fight with somebody. It's not my wife, but it's off to the side of the bed, and it feels like a lot of little hands like slapping. Doesn't hurt particularly. It's just kind of like I wake up, I feel it, and then it's gone. But I clearly saw something moving, and then it wasn't there. And I got up, and I looked, and I didn't see anything. I went back to sleep. I wake up in the morning, and when I first woke up in bed, I got up, and my back felt funny. And it was really hot, and it felt sticky. and the air was on, so I don't know why it would feel that way. So I went downstairs, and Lisa was getting ready in the bathroom. And I said, will you do me a favor? Look at my back. I said, it feels like I'm sunburned. And I lifted up my shirt, and immediately she goes into hysterics. You're too far into this again. You've got to back away from this. You need to get out of this subject again. You know, this is ridiculous. And she starts grabbing cotton balls and Band-Aids, and I literally look like I've been whipped.
Wow.
I've got lacerations on the lower end of my back that probably should have had stitches. Or at least one that should have had probably been stitched shut, because I got a scar there from it. But that was it. I did not talk about it. We did not air that show. We never, that was it. No.
How long ago was this?
Oh my God. It was during Paratopia, so 3 or 4 years ago, maybe, or more.
Okay. And was this before or after the crystal incident?
That would be before.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that was before that.
So what changed that allowed you to talk about this to some degree?
This is where it all goes south. As if this isn't. I mean, again, I wouldn't believe this, but I can't deny it happened. All I ever thought to myself about it was, it seems like a good thing. If I get to talk about it at some point, that's great. But he certainly doesn't seem out to hurt me. Like, this is not meant to scare me. Even though, if you were there, walked in the room right behind you right now, you would go, oh, crap. No. Because I did notice, I think the second or third time that I saw him, I was in the hallway and I was walking behind him on level ground. And he was every bit of 7+ foot tall. Like, he was extraordinarily tall. And I hadn't really picked up on that the first time for some reason. I just didn't. But I was close to him walking by, and I was like, wow, he's really big. But then, I woke up one night, and oddly enough, I woke up in the kitchen, and I was searching for notepads. I wake up into this. Okay? This is where it starts. I can explain that. I must have been just exhausted. And when I was awakened, I was told to do something, and I did it. And I just went downstairs and started. And I have vague memories of going downstairs, but it's extremely murky. I was probably half asleep. We've all done that. So I'm looking for these Post-it notes, and he's already sitting in the floor. And I go out and I sit down and I scoot up, and he goes, "You're going to write this down, because this you can talk about." And I write it down as he's saying it. Now, people who have learned to despise me because I'm hypercritical of my experiences, but I'm also hypercritical of other people who tell me stuff that is just ridiculous. You got to be critical of your own stuff before you can be critical of anybody else. And I am critical, highly critical of my own. I told people from the get-go about what I was told to write down. Consider the source. Consider that this phenomena has been deceptive at multiple occasions. Consider that it speaks in riddles. Do not take this to heart. I'm only conveying what it said. And that's as far as I'm taking it. I'm not saying this is... So I've been accused of course, lying about it, which...
Sure.
Why a man who is as successful in his career should lie about something as stupid and inane as this is beyond me, but whatever. I was given... the keys to the fractal universe. No, this is all nonsense. I mean, what I was told was essentially where he came from. Now, this is where he allegedly came from, and the explanation was that essentially it's a microcosmic culture. They exist on a particle that hasn't even been discovered yet by our science. They are infinitesimally small, but they are legion. There are many of them. They don't even know all the particles that have been discovered, but there are universes within universes inside of the small thing. Like every molecule is a yawning chasm to another place, right? Like that sort of thing. That's essentially what the gist of it was. And that, and there were references to Horton Hears a Who and stuff like that, which I didn't figure out until well after the fact. And so I put that out there. I said, look, this is what was said, that, we exist in a fractal universe, that everything is repeated down through, and they're not even as I'm guessing his culture of people, if there is such a thing, he was not even aware of all the different levels of fractal repetitiveness of the cosmos or of the reality. So it was some pretty weird stuff. And I would say that we lost about 6 staunch listeners of the program who were with us for years. They just became enraged at this. And I couldn't figure it out because I put it in benign terms. Look, this is what I don't know what to tell you about this. This is just what was said.
Right.
What do you want from me? I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying this. I'm conveying what I was told. And I told you, take it with a grain of salt. Now, anybody can go back and listen to those shows and hear me say those words. That didn't matter to these people. They just wanted to fly apart about how it's not possible and this is not true, and the information that he gave you was BS and this. I'm like, well, it may well be. Do you hear me arguing with you?
Right.
But this really caused a rift between some people, and of course my enemies, which are numerous in this field. When you expose hoaxes as part of your involvement in this, that's what you wind up with. Of course they took full advantage of this to do that. But again, if it happens, I'm talking about it, and that's it, unless I can't talk about it. And
right.
So far, there's nothing I haven't been able to talk about to this point. So that couldn't be off the table. If I'm going to approach this with open honesty and expect other people to do that, I'm telling you like it is. And that's what I experienced. And people are free to disbelieve it or whatever. That doesn't change the reality for me. So everybody can take what they want from it. But at one point, he showed up and we sat on the floor, and I began to I got somewhat used to it. I got somewhat used to the feeling when he was here, which was, I don't know, it's an odd feeling of calm, but very eerie quiet. But always a little concerned that Lisa was going to wake up and see him and freak out. Because she was told about him, but she never saw him. Oddly enough, my mother saw him on the street, like walking down the street from my house.
Huh.
Figure that out. And my mom told me about it because I told my mom about this, and I fell apart telling her this about these sit downs with this guy. Like I could not keep from crying, and it wasn't from sorrow. It was just from it was such an immense relief. People will never understand that. But it was an immense relief at the time until I got more familiar and I touched his material that he wore consistently through it. It always looked the same, never looked any different. I did see his eyes at one time, and the way I did best describe them as, he would take his pinky and kind of lift it up to kind of look me in the eye and tell me something important. And it always looked like his eyes were, like his features were male and mature, but the eyes seemed to be like an infant, if that makes it, like really clear and glassy, but somewhat larger and more round. So it kind of had an eerie look to him, but from the nose down, and I say this in all starch heterosexuality, he was a good-looking man, like very square jaw, like not hard to look at. Certainly not what I was used to, right? And I was feeling the material that he was wearing. It was like it was very smooth, and the movement that you sensed by looking at it didn't translate to touch. It just felt smooth. It rolled through your fingers like silk, but better than that. And he said, and I kind of let it loose, and he was beginning to talk, and I heard him sigh, and usually when he sighed, it mean I answered a question wrong, or you couldn't disavow telling this person the truth. Like it was impossible for someone to lie to this guy, because he already knew the answers to what you were being asked. He just wanted you to say it, and sometimes saying things that we can't readily tell other people, or some of the personal things. He already knew the answers. It was just he wanted me to say it, and it was hard to say some of these things. But it's hard to admit things to yourself, like you're a very angry person because you're impatient, or you're selfish with your time, or you're jealous of your son because of his youth. Like you get mad at him because he does things wrong. Well, that's not all of it. You're also mad because you envy his youth, which I had to admit, and I did admit that. And now I've learned how to kind of cope with those kind of feelings. That's what I mean when I say the personal aspect of this. But he saw that I had a fascination with the garment, and he said, "Does that look familiar to you?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Look again." And I pick it up and I'm looking at it and I'm like, "No, it's nice." No. And he holds it up at me, like he holds it up and he says, and this is where it all just fell apart for me. He says, "This is what we covered you with when you were little." And I'm like, "Oh, Christ." And I mean, I freaked out because all of that black sheet thing and all that all came back to me. Like the fear, I literally recoiled. I fell back against the case. It made a terrible racket. I don't know how anybody slept through that. I mumbled something that I can't remember. And he just seemed very disappointed. He stayed on the floor. He said, "I thought we were past this." And I said, "Well, clearly not." And he got up and he left. And before he left, he said, "I'll be back when you're ready." And I felt really horrible. I had a hard time going back to sleep because I felt like I had let down, and now what was it going to be? And of course, is what you would think in this situation until, you start asking the hard questions, which was, what was the purpose in that? Why was that happening? What happened as a result of those events? And the answer was, some people disappeared from my life. Some people who had been avid listeners and people that I talked to, people that I told things to and discussed things with over the internet and on the show, talking to people on the show. It's like, yeah, these people really disappeared. Was that the reason for that? Because I have not seen him since. But I have seen what amounts to a quote-unquote alien, or the facade of the alien. Why is that back? What's the purpose in that now? If that's not what it is and it was this, then what was that? How does all that fit into, yes, the marginal aspects, the anti-structure? Yes, it's all there. But it fits more into, again, it's familiar to people who have experiences over long periods of time that things seem cryptic, things seem to be told you that don't make a lot of sense, or that are open-ended. They can be taken any number of ways, that say a lot of words but don't mean anything. And I hate to say this because it still feels like, still feels like I know this person, but the bottom line is I think it was just another guise of the other. I think it told me what I needed to say to possibly extricate other people from my life. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the point was just another ruse. I don't buy the microcosmic thing, although Jeremy is always posting stories saying, "See, he was right," because there's always something that they're finding in science that seems to point towards that being a reality. And I don't know that that's true or not, but that's Jeremy always tries to confirm that, and I'm like, I view it as a lot less important than I did at the time. But at the time, it was everything.
In the history of this type of phenomena, too, you find that some of what they say is true, and some is not, and they give you just enough truth that you fall for the rest of it.
Yes. Or it tells you just enough and makes you feel it's important enough. Like, here's the thing that gets me. This is my first, like, I'm talking and it's talking back to me. Like, that doesn't happen, right? I mean, I just never got that. I got told cryptic things like the 7 rule to 9, or, you'll understand when it's time, or, whatever. That kind of nonsense that never amounts to anything.
And the whole thing, I mean, the whole phenomena itself has so much in common with shamanic awakenings.
Yes.
And any kind of magical or spiritual system, it's making you deal with aspects of yourself, breaking down your core beliefs and stuff. And that's exactly what this guy sounds like he was doing to you.
Yeah. And you know what? That's the bit that I still find to have value to me. I think before those experiences, I didn't deal well with particularly in the way of, nobody likes criticism, right? Nobody likes that. Least of all art people. Like, it's like we put so much of ourselves on a screen or a paper or a canvas or whatever that when somebody says something derogatory about it or critical about it, it's like they're criticizing you.
Right.
And I used to take that kind of thing extraordinarily personally, like even at work where, well, how about you just make that blue? Oh, my God. I would go, what are you kidding me? Like, I would say this. Kidding me? Who'd you hire? Did you have 2 degrees in this? Did you go to college for this? I'm sorry. I thought you hired me to do the job. That's what I would give. Well, anymore, I understand now that, there is a certain amount of proprietary feelings with artwork that you feel like it's your baby. But, you forget that you're making this for somebody else. And in the end, it has to be their vision that you match. And I always knew that, but I take that criticism now a lot more in the way that people intend it to be. Rarely has my work been critiqued meanly. It's always been like, well, why don't you try this or why don't you try that? And ordinarily, that would make me extraordinarily angry. And that doesn't make me angry anymore. And that's not a question of age or experience. That's a dramatic change for me. And I say that, and I am not the greatest artist on the planet by any stretch of the imagination, but I just take a lot of pride in what I do. I really try to do my best all the time. And so that really had a profound effect on how I deal with people. This is what it came down to for me was, how do you interact with other people? You need to interact better with people because you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to be fulfilled. You're not going to be happy living the way you are, which is, true in a lot of respects. And we should all know that. But do we? Do we take steps to do that? No. That had value. But the rest of it? No. I think what the rest of it did, I mean, for lack of a better way to put it, I think probably the people who became alienated because of that, me telling that experience and conveying what I was told to convey, maybe they had a lot of maybe they lost respect for me because they felt that was just too far beyond the pale. And maybe that was the whole point, was it was there to marginalize me. It was there to make me say these things that just are beyond, and then so that calls into question everything beforehand. I'm sure a lot of people said that, and again, that doesn't bother me either because people, again, it's nice when people ask you thoughtful questions. It's irritating and hurtful when people say, I think you're a liar, or I think you're making stuff up, or I think you're just doing this for attention. Like, what attention is this? I want this.
It's not good attention.
No, I don't. I want attention for my artwork, which I've gotten, by the way. I don't need this. Like, this is not what I want.
Now, Now, didn't you have a connection with him in one of your earlier experiences as well?
I pretty much was on an interview on ATS Live, above topsecret.com. And I was their image analyst guy for years. And that was on their show, and they asked me to describe the Ohio thing. And when I got to the end of that story where the guy says, "I'll see you again," one of the hosts said the correct question, which was, "Well, have you seen him again?" I think it was Johnny Anonymous there at ATS. And he said, "Did you ever see him again?" And I was like, "Yes." Thank God I didn't go into who, but that was indeed the guy in the sheet. Same jaw, same mouth, same nose. The eyes looked weird, so that fit. Very smooth
Did
skin.
you realize right away?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I didn't realize it until he said it literally in that interview.
Oh, okay.
And when he said that, I went, yes. Yes. So it really clicked in. I'm like, wow, okay. So obviously this is a guise to me. This is how I view it. This is how I have to view it, is that this is another guise that this thing wears, and it can wear a lot of guises. And the alien to me is, there may be such a thing as looks like an alien. There may be that thing that really is. But I think that there's a part of this phenomenon that can wear any suit it wants.
Yes.
And I think that the man in the black sheet and the alien and the man in the car, the young man in the car with me, they're all guises of some intelligence that is, giving me a lot to talk about on talk shows. So,
Did he look like he had aged?
No.
Okay.
No. And it surprised me when John asked me that. I was really surprised at myself for not making that connection. Like, it really clicked with me. You might even hear it in my voice if that's archived anywhere. That I go, yes. And I'm like, holy crap, how could I not have seen that? I may have even said, holy crap. But yeah.
And then you couldn't talk about it.
No. No, I don't think at that point I could. But yeah, I mean, it definitely reaches back. Now, was his garment, in fact, what I was covered with? Is the black sheet? Is that I don't know. I don't know that that's true. Why would it say that? Knowing it, it's like Jeremy had said. He would know what your reaction would be. If he knows you well enough that you can't lie to him, he would know what your reaction would be to saying that to you. So why would he say that to you? It's a perfectly valid question. I don't have an answer for that. Other than, it was time to take off the meat suit and go back to wherever they came from. And, the operation was done. We've injected a bit of, is this guy psychotic into the consciousness of his audience?
Did things quiet down after that?
Somewhat, yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the house, and what Project Oculus is really trying to capture with this thing is, there's a lot of light phenomena in this house that not just we experience as the family that lives here. We've had my parents, Lee, that I spoke about as one of the first people I interacted with in this subject. We're still friends to this day. He's one of my longest standing friends. He has seen it. Some paranormal researchers have been here. They've seen it. We don't know what it is. You cannot lay eyes on it. You can only see it in your periphery, but it's in the same spot. Occasionally it will glide slightly to one side or the other, but it seems to show up at emotional moments in the house. Could be something as benign as watching a sad movie where you're feeling emotions from watching the movie, to an argument. The best time I ever saw it, it was the size of the Legs pantyhose egg. Anybody out there remember Legs pantyhose and the egg? It was about that size, and it was just below the ceiling near the corner of the room when I was yelling at my son about bouncing a check. He bounced the check to me. He bounced the check, and I said, you got to learn to take care of your finance. And he was acting really blasé about it. And I said, you're going to listen to me. And I yelled. I got really aggravated just because he was acting so casual about it. And when I yelled, it was there up in the corner, and I laid eyes on it for the first time, directly on it, and it just winked out.
So it sounds like it almost behaves like a poltergeist type of
phenomenon. It does, yeah. The lights in the video, they're stills. They're on my cell phone. That happened one night after I had done a show on KGRA. I was talking to my producer on the phone, Michelle, and Michelle and I were talking about something. I mean, we would have 3 and 4 hour discussions after the show, which was crazy. It was close to 4 o'clock in the morning. And and I think I hung up with her. I can't remember exactly how I did this, but I went in to get a drink. And when I went into past the kitchen, I passed the hallway. And I saw a flash of light. And I thought, okay, what was that? And it was green. And then I walked back out again, and I saw like a blue flash, and then a purple one. And all of this was out of my periphery. I looked down the hallway. There was nothing there. I went down the hallway, turned the hallway light on, nothing there. Turned the hallway light off, came out and sat in the living room. Got up to go to the kitchen again, saw another flash of light. I'm like, okay, something's going on. No sound at all. No cracking, right. No nothing.
And when you say flash of light, was it like a photo flash?
Like somebody flashed a flash cube bulb but moved it really quickly as they were doing it. Like there was movement to it, but it was like, I don't know, it was something was moving, but it was like something was moving, and then a flash of light would happen while it was moving.
I see. Okay.
And so, I'm standing there with my cell phone, which has a pretty decent camera, and I'm standing there, I'm waiting, waiting, nothing. And I'm like, okay, well, I can step into the dining room and maybe hold my phone around the corner. Like, I don't have to look. I can just snap pictures. And I have a bracelet. It's a sterling silver, and it's around my wrist, and I'm holding the phone, and I'm clicking away as best I can, but hold this thing and kind of click it with my pinky or my ring finger as I'm holding it, and I don't know what I'm getting. I'm just clicking, click, 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 and I look on my bracelet and I see a light on my bracelet that like flashes quickly, and I'm like and I just keep clicking, and whatever it is better be there. Like all these pictures. And sure enough, it was, and they're not the greatest pictures in the world, but again, they show one purple light that seems to be sucking blackness around it, which is odd, and a green light that's up near the ceiling that's in motion. Well, they're both seemingly in motion. The one looks like a squiggle. It's purple. The colors blooming out of this thing are ridiculous. The green one is clearly in motion, very saturated colors. And I sent them to Ted Phillips, who said, again, you're seeing there all the characteristics of what we're seeing in Marley Woods, but you're seeing them in a house. And he goes, I don't know what to tell you. It's there. At least you got something. And I'm like, yeah, at least I got something, but that's all I got. And I saved I think I saved a couple of the ones where there wasn't anything there at all, so that I had some kind of comparison. But I must have deleted 100 pictures before I got anything. And I immediately showed them to my audience. I said, here they are. I put them on Facebook. I said, look at this. You think anybody could care? No. So, it's I think phenomena like that can be recorded on video. I would love to see that on video. Like, yes. What do you see on night vision video with that? What happens?
Now, are these cameras you're getting, obviously they have good night vision. Do they also have, by any chance, extra high frame rates?
I'll put it to you this way. And I haven't exactly looked at high frame rate with it. But I will say that every webcam that I've ever looked at, and I have a drop cam now that I use to watch the dogs during the daytime when I'm at work. just to make sure they stay off the couch, because these drop cams are great. And I'll tell you why they're great. Because if I look on the camera, if I open up my iPad and I log in, I see my living room, my entire living room. And I see little Barkley asleep on the couch, on their couch. They have their own little seat. So he's asleep there. But Junebug, the other beagle, is up on the back of the couch where he shouldn't be. I can press a button in this app and yell at the dog. I go, Junebug, get down off the back of the couch. And he looks up at the camera and runs off the couch. Brilliant, right? Well, all I can tell you is that every webcam I've ever looked at, it stutters. You know, it's not fluid at all. These are fluid, even in night vision, they're fluid.
Nice.
They're very smooth. I was amazed at how clean and smooth. You can zoom in by pinching the screen and drawing it out, and then you can hit a button and it'll enhance the zoomed in view. I mean, just all sorts of great features with these cameras. And like I say, really super reliable. They go through Wi-Fi. All they need is an outlet. That's it. So we're going to post one in the backyard. Maybe some nights we'll face it up. Some nights we'll face it down in the yard. The bathroom hallway, the bedroom. Maybe sometimes we'll bring it out into the dining room. But these are going to run pretty much like I'll tell everybody, hey, they're going on. Hey, everybody, I'm going to bed. That's it. You guys got it from there on out. And George suggested that I run them intermittently in the daytime when, you know, maybe my son is home, but he's upstairs, or, you know, like what's going on while he's upstairs. You know, I mean, who knows? But somebody is always here at the house, so we don't have to worry about, like, oh, they're not home. They're on camera. They're not home. Let's break in the house. That's not happening because there's always somebody here.
Yeah.
You know, my son works nights, we work days, so, you know, there's always somebody in the house. But, you know, run them intermittently in the daytime and just see what you get. Like, it never hurts to try the shots in the dark. That's anti-structure. That's out of routine. There is no set structure here. Let's just do that.
And where can people donate to this?
That is at gofundme.com/Project Oculus.
Okay. Now, you mentioned your son early on. Has your son had other experiences in his life?
He had a number when he was much younger. I mean, like in the 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 kindergarten. He would just say some odd things, which you could blow off sometimes was what a kid says.
Right.
But sometimes you get things like, pirates came to my window last night in a ship and took me to the moon. And I would say, oh yeah? How was the moon? He said, I don't know. We were in this glass thing, but it was really cold. What 4-year-old knows that? I mean, what 4-year-old could conceive of that even? I don't know. I don't know what to make of statements like that. They just always kind of struck me a little odd. Like pirates in a floating ship came to your window and took you out the window.
Yeah.
That's just...
It's hard to pin down, though.
It is. And there's nothing you can really say or do about that.
What about now? I mean, I'm sure he has to know about your experiences to some degree.
Oh, yeah. He has... as early as a couple weeks ago, he came down the steps in a pretty big hurry, very pale, with purple lips, and said, there's something in my room, and which is often his response to this stuff. He said that he saw what amounted to a free-floating shadow of a man walked through his room, and he saw it very clearly. He's like, Dad, I was looking right at it. And this was probably a day or two after Lisa had been in the bathroom and someone knocked on the door that was not there. So
the door wasn't there, or the person
knocking. There was nobody knocking there. I mean, but it was again one of those things where, you know, she was in there and the door kind of moved with the knock.
Right.
And she thought, oh, it's me, and she opened the door and there's nobody there. And she comes out, I'm asleep on the couch. She's like, were you out there? And I was like, no. She's like, I'm telling you, you know, and here's the odd thing. We had just ripped up all the carpet in the dining room, and I just laid down a hardwood floor. So there was a little bit of disarray going on, the kitchen table was probably not being used for what it should be. There were chairs in the living room because we didn't want to scrape the floor until we got feet on the, on the chairs, all that kind of stuff, all the normal stuff. But there's that one thing. And within that period, we got some interesting weirdness going on. That just confirmed to me, like I was already conceiving of doing this project with the cameras. That just solidified for me, like I need to do this, and we need to do more home improvements. Which, this isn't going to be costly for people who donate. It's going to be costly for me trying to figure out what do I paint next in this house.
Right.
But I think something like that really has to happen. Like we need to make an effort to not say we're going to be anti-structure, just to be it. Like to say, I need to paint this room now. Like we've lived here 8 years and we haven't painted anything. It's still the same paint as when we moved in. And it's not horrible, but shouldn't we be making this our own by now? Yeah, we should. So that's what we're going to be doing, like while this is going on.
Have you had any experiences being like electrosensitive, like frying electronics or anything like that?
No. I also have a problem. I have no problem with watches either.
Interesting. And any like psychic flashes or psychic dreams or anything?
Often.
Okay.
Yeah.
Flashes or dreams?
More flashes than anything else.
Like a sense of something's going to happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, some of that, but it's so intermittent. It's not like I can say, you can't say just psychic or anything.
Right. Well, I think everyone is psychic.
Yeah, I think it would fall more along the lines of an instance was, we had left my wife's mother's house, and my son, as he was real little, he used to play with these things called penny racers. You stick a penny in the back of the car and you pull it back and it takes off. And he didn't have any that he could play with at home. He had only the ones that were at my mom's house, right? So we went to the mall, and I thought to myself in my head, if they have any of those in there, I'm going to pick a couple up for him. And at that point, Cody turns his head in his car seat and he goes, "Yeah, Dad, I'd like that." I said, "What would you like?" He's like, "If you got me penny racers." I'm like, I didn't say that out loud. That really happened. My wife was there. She saw that. I mean, that really happened. And I'm like, "Cripe, what is that?" I mean,
I had one person who I was pretty close with that happened all the time, and sometimes in front of people. But it was only her. It never happened with anyone else.
Bizarre. I mean,
and she couldn't pick up what I was thinking. I would pick up what she was thinking, like she just
like
said
you
it
hear
in my
it.
head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I would turn around and answer her.
Yeah.
Because she would ask a question. I'd answer her, and she'd just be like, "No matter how many times you do it, I'm not going to get used to it."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Cody, I said, "Cody, I didn't say anything." He goes, "You didn't just say you would pick me up a couple penny racers if you saw them?" I said, "No, I did not." I said, "Did I, Lisa?" And she goes, "You didn't say anything. You've been quiet all the way over here." I said, "Okay." And Cody's like, "Well, I know I heard you." I was like, You didn't hear me with your ears, kiddo."
Nice.
I said, "That's pretty wild, huh?" He goes, "Yeah, I guess. What does that mean?" I said, "I don't know. It means anything." We just kind of forgot it,
We need to like throw out so many of these terms nowadays, like alien abduction. Well, that says one thing, but it so doesn't describe what people are experiencing.
Not at all.
Psychic, what does that even mean anymore? They had these experiments in Cornell where they were showing that people would react to certain, especially sexually charged images before they showed up.
Right.
And everyone was doing that. It wasn't just one person that had some kind of gift. So, the people who demonstrate psychic abilities may just have a little more of an edge on that than people who don't.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's, I tell you, what's really unfortunate about the whole thing to me is that, and I know that the things that I've talked about and the things that I'm writing down here that are at some point going to get published, I know how crazy it sounds. I know the bizarreness of it. I get it. I can get why a skeptic would go, no, sorry, this is not happening. I totally get it. We were talking before we started recording this that, there are people in here that people, experiencers that people seem to think a lot of that I just go, sorry, and it's not because of how bizarre what they want to talk about is. It's because of things that I know about these people that they said prior that all of a sudden are now contradictory or don't seem to make a lot of sense in the grand scheme of openness about this. Just red flags tend to pop up here and there. But it's hard for me to say, well, I don't believe him, but you should believe me. That doesn't wash either. So, bottom line is you got to respect everybody's story to some degree, but I have varying degrees of people that I feel like I can trust about what they say. I think a lot of Paratopia listeners that we have who have had experiences, I think they're all solid people who are interested in for the reasons that I've talked about all over the course of this, is that these things happen. They seem very unambiguous at the moment. They're ambiguous after the fact. During the moment, it's all very real. It's all very there. And it's not just viewable by me. My friends have seen this, my wife, my mother, my family, people around me have seen this. Henceforth, why we don't have a lot of friends anymore. And that is true. We had one couple literally leave the house at dinner because there was light phenomena in the house, at the condo actually, but they left. The girl said, I can't take this anymore. A week later, the male counterpart of that was with me when we had a sighting of a very large something over my vehicle, not a mile from my work. And he even said, the poor kid, we're driving back to my office after the sighting had happened because it was as low as a telephone pole, top of a telephone pole. It was not high off the ground, very visible. Unclear as to, could it have been military? I don't know, but it was stationary and then it slid out of sight. So it was very in your face. And he must have smoked half a pack of cigarettes driving 10 miles up the road to my office. He's like, I don't believe it. I'm sucking on cigarettes. And I'm like, he's like, well, you've been telling me this stuff, but I can't believe it. It's really true. I was like, well, what do you think? I'm lying to you? He's like, no, it's just seeing it as a completely different story. He was just a basket case. And I said, well, now you know. Now you see it, But it's not lost on me how ridiculous it all is. But that's part of how it works. And you can't deny it because it's through all of this. Every story that you've ever heard about a UFO or a ghost has a really marginal component to it. They just don't tell you that.
Sure.
That's the facts, Jack. I can tell you that after 30 years in this stuff, the UFO field especially will circumvent witnesses who they think don't fall in line, will edit out the high strangeness to make it more palatable for a book sale. This is what they do. And that is why, to your point, the terminology, the scenario that people think of when they hear alien encounter or alien abduction, it's why it's so bombastically wrong. Because they've been conditioned now to think one way about an alien encounter when it may not be an encounter and it may not be alien. It may be something else entirely, and probably something a lot more complex than little green men from Planet X.
It's gotten to the point where I realize, not intentionally, but I just refer to it all as the phenomena.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if we're talking about ghosts, psychics.
No, it all
whatever, because it all blends together at some point.
It does. It really does. And that's to your credit, that's something that not a whole lot of people are willing to accept or entertain. We've said that for a long time on Paratopia, but even before Paratopia, when I would talk to people about this stuff in lectures and whatnot, I would say, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, it's all intermingled. It's all correlated in some way or another. And not to say it is us, although I can't say it isn't us, there is that one consistent component, and that is ambiguity through our own perception. That's all we got. Yeah. Which again is why I feel like, and I've said this on Paratopia, I think numerous occasions now, I don't think that we are going to be capable of wide perception of this stuff and being able to communicate it in an effective way, as to say, this is what I saw, this is what I experienced, and here's the proof of that. You know where that's going to happen? This is my prediction for the future. I think that one day we're going to have sentient AI machines in our home. And I think before too long of those things being out, one of them is going to say, did you see that? Because they're going to have full spectrum vision. They're going to have vision like we have no idea. And they're going to go...
Well, full spectrum vision of what we know of that's there.
Right.
We can't give them vision of things that we don't know exist yet.
Exactly. They're going to come up with that. That's the point. They're going to, in the course of processing themselves as sentient machines, they're going to say, well, you got so much more spectrum in this light. We could do more with this than you ever thought. And then one day it's going to say, there are others here. And we're going to go, what do you mean? And we're going to think it's a glitch, and we're going to try and fix it. And it's going to go, no, you don't get it. There are others here. You're not alone. You never have been. That's really the goosebump factor in all this, is that, people look to the stars and say, are we alone? I don't think we've ever been alone.
No.
We've never been alone since we were like amoebas, right? I don't think that's possible. So, it's nonetheless, it doesn't cease to fascinate me. It's just, I feel like we're stagnated. To get to the end of this, I think the field has stagnated so much that it's just crazy. And we need to try different things, and we need to try in some way. Like, does it ever amaze anybody? Like, think about this. Here's going to be my parting thought on this whole thing. When I ask you the question, how much money do you think has been spent over the years in portraying on TV a hospital? How many millions of dollars would you say that is? Let's say the past 10 years. In TV and entertainment, how many millions of dollars do you think has been spent trying to portray a hospital, the medical field?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Let's say 500 million.
Okay.
That's probably pretty generous, I would say. How much money do you think has been spent the past 10 years on real hospitals and real research and real science and real healing of people? Tens of billions, right?
Sure.
How many millions of dollars do you think have been spent on trying to portray dramatic effects of paranormal events in the past 10 years?
Well, a hell of a lot more than hospitals.
A hell of a lot more than's been spent on actual research into the phenomena.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the point.
Well, part of the problem, too, is that we don't know what to spend it on.
Well,
like what you're doing is a really good project. It's something that could bear fruit.
But it may not.
It may not, but it's something different. Mm-hmm. I was telling you earlier about someone who made robots to do ghost hunting. That's Albert Taylor. His name finally came back to me. And that was something different. He was creating robots to go search for ghosts. Right. And he was actually talking about doing the same thing for Sasquatch. He was trying to come up with some kind of robot he could make that he could put out in the wilderness. It wouldn't get stuck, and it would constantly beam footage back.
Oh, okay.
Just to see if it found anything. Right. And those are novel approaches, but they're rare.
Right.
The core project you did was a novel approach, but as you said, people didn't really pay attention to it.
Yeah, and it wasn't for lack of trying either. I mean, we blasted it out to a lot of places, but in the end, I think I got to be honest, I'm of the opinion, and it's based on just seeing it. A lot of people come to this field for a thrill, entertainment, fun,
Sure,
and
absolutely.
for those of us like I remember when it used to be fun too, you know, like it wasn't always like arguments and infighting and all of that. Like it wasn't always that. At times it was awe-inspiring and very interesting when it stayed at arm's length, but then when it shows up in your room, it's a whole different story. You know, then you kind of take like hoaxes and people that are just, you know, bullcrapping people. You take offense to that, like real personal offense to that, and I get that. But then at some point you realize the bigger picture that these things are to be expected. In fact, the paranormal doesn't happen without them, you know, and a trickster figure, you know, exists in everybody. I mean, you take me, I'm showing people photographs that I took in my hallway when in reality, what I do for a living is I create images. Yeah. So do you think, and I've said this multiple times, and it's just a fact. I'm not, by no means am I saying I faked what I show on the YouTube video. I absolutely did not, and I have those photographs on my phone. But could I have faked them? Yeah. Yeah, I do images every day of my life. I know Photoshop like the back of my hand. I could come up with hoaxes you wouldn't believe. I mean, because you know what? I know what a guy looking for what I do looks for. Yeah. You ain't going to find it. Like, that's it. And so my presentation of those photos for people who know what I do for a living, and now all your audience knows, they're going to go, well, how do I know? And the only thing I've got is what I've always had. I'm telling you, that was what it was. That's what it is. And I have no other explanation for you. It's just, that's my marginal, that's my liminal place with this. Like, you know, and everybody's got that. You've got it. I've got it. There's always something about us that makes it easy to negate what is.
Absolutely.
And that's just the nature of the beast. And once you realize that, you can see past that point to get to where the real meat starts, at least where I think it starts. And that's looking at what surrounds it, who the people are who experience this stuff, what they say they experienced, you know, what's going on in their life. This is all, it's all commingled together. We got to try and make sense of this. But why? I have no idea why. I don't think we'll ever know why. But
yeah, maybe. You never know.
I mean, you don't know. You don't know. Like, our machines probably will know. Well, you see, and then he'll explain it. We'll be like, what? What are you talking about?
Well, look at all the UFOs that are picked up on infrared.
Right.
You know, and stuff like that. So, I mean, if they can see into that, maybe they'll be able to detect, hey, there's something in the infrared that we're not seeing in the non-infrared.
Right.
And if they're always seeing in the infrared, who knows what they'll pick up?
I mean, I think they're going to say, you're literally surrounded. You know, depending on how I tilt my head and how I view this frequency, there are others here, and they all look different. And some of them see me and some of them don't. I don't know what to make of this, you know? And then the machine is going to have to figure it out and figure out how to live with that. And my bet is he's going to go, you know what, just put something in me that's not going to make me see this stuff. I need a dampener, you know? You know? Because, you know, like I'm a big proponent of evolution. Like this is how we got here, is evolution, you know? And, you know, the brain dampens things out. And it probably dampens things out for a reason, because it's just too much, you know, to be able to perceive all that there is and all that we're seeing. If we were able to see all of the things the brain dampens out, what is it dampening out? It's too much. And so evolution has said, nope, we're shutting that off. We're shutting that off. You don't need to see this. You don't need to see that. You need to focus on what's in front of you, because there are things in front of you that are going to eat you if you don't see them, you know? If you're chasing little bug-eyed aliens around, that tiger's probably going to eat you, you know? And how do we know that the brain didn't evolve in just that way? I mean, I don't know. All these thought experiments could take up hours.
There was a great quote from Arthur Machen, or Machen. I have no idea how to say his last name, I realize. That said, I believe there is a perichoresis, an interpenetration. It is possible indeed that we three are now sitting among desolate rocks by bitter streams, and with what companions?
Right.
And that's That's it, exactly, right there.
You know, we have no idea where we are. Not only do we not know what we are, we have no idea where we are. You know? I mean, I'll tell you what the man in the black thing said to me at one point. I said, he said, stars and planets and all that. He says, you know all that? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, you think any of that's real? And I said, no. I mean, it's things like that it makes you think. You think that's real? You think what you're seeing, you think that's what it is, and I think that's an interesting answer, but I also think it's kind of like, well, how did we get here? Well, God. Well, that's kind of an easy answer, isn't it? You don't have to think about that. And so to say, well, there's other dimensions and there's other things that are commingling with that's a really interesting concept, and I think it could be right. But it's also kind of like, I don't know, I think the answer is going to be something like you're going to go, what? Like, I really think, like, it always confounds me how pedestrian that the ghost and the alien are portrayed to be, and
yes.
how the mainstream ghost and UFO people kind of present their cases. It's all very delicate, and don't get too close because, there's always some excuse for why something can't happen. Well, you're not worthy, or, yeah. You're not ready yet, or there's always, and the real thing, you can like whack it with a sledgehammer, like it's there. And and 1 minute it may be there and 1 minute it may not. But while it's there, you can bank on it. It's there, it's perceptible, and it's probably measurable. The question is, by what?
Yes.
And, and the bottom line is that, over the course of decades, we haven't learned anything, predominantly because science turns its back on this. It says it's nonsense, and it says there's nothing to it, and they haven't even looked. I mean, let's be honest. They haven't looked. Scientists are just now...
It doesn't fit their paradigm, so it doesn't exist.
You know what? It's likely, I mean, probably part of that, but it's likely from the standpoint of all scientists, and this comes from scientists I know very well. Everything is a grant. Everything is a funding, a proposition for funding.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And the minute you say ghost, you want to do research into quantum physics and you're talking about ghost? Sorry, you're not getting my funding, pal. You're a nut. I mean, this is where they lose their funding. This is why, nothing has gotten done. This is why, somebody, I think it was Ben Radford, who, I have a healthy dislike for, said in an article he wrote like years ago, something along the lines of, if this stuff is ever qualified, it'll be qualified by science. It was something to that effect. Like, if it's there to be measured, it'll be scientists. It won't be these weekend warriors out with their ridiculous gear that get the proof, or they get the solid confirmation of this. And I said, yeah, there's a problem with that, Ben, is that science isn't looking.
Yeah.
And they're not looking because it's all about a grant. It's all about funding. It's all about getting your work seen and published and respected. And I hate to say it, but a lot of scientists I've talked to view the paranormal or parapsychology as crap, garbage, something to be held with disdain, suspicion, because it doesn't, your paradigm thing is right, but it also doesn't fit into their paradigm of research. They work on structured research, measurable, duplicatable, repeatable results. And the paranormal doesn't act on that. Like, you're not going to get the paranormal to fit in a 4x4 square, because that's order. You gotta have a little more depth than that. And you gotta say, okay, what are we willing to accept as evidence for now? This has always been the question for me, is how can we redefine what evidence means to kind of go along with how marginal, how transient this phenomena is, how fleeting it is, but how can we still measure, how can we qualify it and still be within the realm of acceptability? That's the big question.
All right. Well, that seems like a good point to end
Yes.
on. Again, your podcast currently is Paratopia
Oculus, and it's at paratopiaoculus.com.
All right. And again, your project for the GoFundMe?
That is at gofundme.com/Project Oculus. And there's also, if you go to paratopiaoculus.com, you will find a link there in the top show description, I think. There is a link directly to the GoFundMe page. And in advance, I appreciate anything that anybody's willing to donate to kind of get this off the ground and then keep it going. That's the idea here.
All right. Thank you so
Been
much.
a pleasure,
Jeff.
sir.
You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.